We're back on the record, case 12 CF 1083A, State versus George Zimmerman. Do we have a juror ready to go?
I'll check and see.
Okay.
Honor, I-14 is present.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. You have been and will continue to be referred to as juror I-14. The attorneys are going to ask, take a deep breath. The attorneys are going to ask you questions about the questionnaire you filled out last Tuesday morning, okay? We're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda. You may proceed.
Please support. Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to be asking you at this part of the jury selection process limited questions regarding what you know about the case in terms of media exposure. Okay? I read your questionnaire that you filled out, and you said that you heard on the news about Trayvon Martin being shot by a man on Neighborhood Watch.
Yes.
And was that from local news or national news?
I was about a year ago, or maybe longer, on national news, I think.
And you said it was local news, or?
I heard it from school, so.
Oh, okay. You don't watch much TV news, I gather?
Not much.
Okay. And how about from any newspaper at all? Do you remember reading anything about it?
No.
Okay. So how about on the internet?
I'll see it on, like, if I go on, like, AOL for mail, I'll see, like, the news. Might see it on there.
Do you use Facebook or any of that other stuff?
I use Facebook.
Okay. Did you come across it in Facebook at all? How about any YouTube related to this case at all?
No.
Okay. And I know you're answering me, and I'm able to tell when you're shaking your head and you're saying yes by nodding, but for purposes of the record, since we're in court and we have a court reporter taking it down, you got to say yes or no.
Okay.
I could tell what your answer was, but this lady right in front of you needs to take it down.
Okay.
Just sit back and relax. You're like every other juror that's come. We're just going to ask you some questions just to get to know what you know about the case. Okay?
Yes,
There's
sir.
no right answer other than what you remember. And if you don't remember something, it's perfectly all right to say I don't know or I don't remember.
Okay.
Okay. What you do when you heard about it in the news, what do you recall hearing about it?
I recall hearing that Mr. Zimmerman had called the police when he was following Trayvon Martin.
Okay.
And I know that the police told him to stop following him.
Okay. And anything else you can recall about what happened?
I do recall Mr. Zimmerman claiming that Trayvon Martin had attacked him, I believe.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Do you always believe what you hear in the news about something, whether it's true or not?
No.
You don't think it's always accurate?
No.
Okay. And did you mention you also heard about this at school?
Yes.
Okay. Was there other just guys or gals or girls talking about it at school?
Yes.
Okay. Did they tell you they had like any inside knowledge, like, you know, they were there when it happened, or are they just telling you what they read or heard?
No, they just told me what.
Okay. Do you remember anything that they might have told you that you haven't told us already in terms of what they knew about what happened?
All I heard was he didn't have a weapon on him, Trayvon Martin.
That who didn't have a weapon on?
Trayvon Martin.
Okay. Anything else that kind of jumps out right now in terms of what you remember?
No.
Okay. Do you remember on the news seeing any photographs related to this case at all?
No, I just saw photographs of Mr. Zimmerman.
Okay. photographs of Mr. Zimmerman. What did the photograph or photographs of Mr. Zimmerman look like?
It looked like a post-arrest shot.
Anything else you can remember, photographs of Mr. Zimmerman or photographs related to this case? Did you see any photographs of Trayvon Martin? that you recall?
Yes, I do.
What did that photograph or photographs look like?
I don't, it was just, I can vaguely remember it was just him. It wasn't,
Okay. Do you remember listening to any kind of, if there are any recordings related to this case, any kind of audio recordings or videos or anything?
I know my mom watches HLN sometimes, so
Okay.
I heard a few things over that.
And is that your mom telling you about that, or you actually just kind of
No, just
glancing?
walking around the house. And,
Okay. What do you remember on HLN about this case?
just, I heard just talking about it when it first occurred, about the basic knowledge about it, about Mr. Zimmerman shooting him.
Okay. In either somebody telling you about it or just you glancing at TV at some time, do you remember anything about like what was happening in court, like proceedings in front of the court?
No, I thought that this case had ended before
Okay.
it was called.
Now, you stated in your questionnaire that you had not formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of the defendant. Is that correct?
Yes.
That means you have not made up your mind one way or the other. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes would you agree that what's always, or what has been published in the news by media, TV or whatever, that they don't always get it right?
Yes, sometimes.
Okay. In the media exposure that you've had, in addition to just people telling the news, have you heard commentary, like people talking about the case, lawyers or other people saying this is relevant or this isn't or this is what this means?
No.
Okay. Do you remember any kind of news conference of any type related to this case by any of the parties, like from the state, from the defense attorneys, or anybody else related to this case?
No.
Okay. You mentioned that you would have heard about it last year sometime at first?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you kind of kept up with it as it's going along, like what happened, or
No.
you got other things in your life?
Yeah.
Okay. How about when you got the summons to come as a juror? I know once you came to court, you were admonished by the court not to read or talk to anybody about the case or watch anything. I'm talking about prior to that, the time you got the summons to come and actually coming. Did you go on the internet and say, hey, what's going on in Seminole County? I wonder what case that might be involved in, and let me find out.
No.
Okay. Did anybody talk to you in anticipation of you coming to court and saying, oh, you're going to be on the Zimmerman case potentially?
No, I got like post remarks from friends and family
Okay. About potentially being a juror?
Yeah.
Okay. Did they talk about the Zimmerman case, or did they just talk about this is what you need to do to be a juror, or this is not what you need to do?
I had a few people talk to me saying you might be on the Zimmerman case,
Okay.
but because I knew that
What
was,
else did they say other than you might be on the Zimmerman case?
that's it.
Did they express an opinion, like you need to make sure you get on and you need to make sure you vote this way, or let me tell you about some facts that you may not come out, anything like that?
No.
Okay. Is the posting or comments that they made mainly like you might be on the Zimmerman case, or was there anything else in addition to that?
No, it's just that. It's just I know June 10th is they're assigning jurors for the Zimmerman case.
Right. And you responding to them, I'm assuming that you respond to them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like maybe.
Sure, okay. And your response to them, did you in any way say, yeah, I'm going to vote this way, or this was this, or this was that? Did you comment at all about the case, other than saying, yeah, I might be on the jury?
No.
Assuming you weren't on the jury, assuming you were just living here in Seminole County, and you had a friend that you hadn't seen in a long time come to your house, and he was spending the night or spending a week at your house, and he says, what's this all about, George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin? What would you tell them? If they were to tell you, what's this all about?
I'd tell them that It happened about a year ago when George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin, and it's really all I would tell them.
Okay. You mentioned that you had heard on the news or somebody told you about that George Zimmerman had called the police, correct?
Yes.
And that he had followed him. And this is what you're hearing on the news or what people are telling you?
Yeah, on the news, yes.
Okay. Now, as we talked about earlier, you're not saying that that's accurate or inaccurate, or do you know?
No, I don't know. That's just what I heard on the TV.
In other words, you didn't take that as the gospel truth, in other words, that that was accurate?
No.
Okay. In terms of the limited coverage that there was about this case, did you think there were, when I say they, meaning the media, were they favoring one side versus the other, do you know?
It seemed like, from what I heard on TV, they were favoring for Trayvon Martin's case.
And I gather, since you've put on your questionnaire here that you have not formed an opinion, did that sway you one way or the other? What
No.
the media people were saying?
No.
Okay. In addition to the case itself, in terms of the shooting, do you remember any other aspect of the case? And when I say the case, I'm talking about what happened, anything in terms of the community, people speaking out or anything like that. Do you remember any other thing like that?
I think I heard from somebody that, like, some people were having rants and some people were really upset with what happened.
Some people, you say they use the word rants?
Yeah, or riots.
Okay, all right. What did you think of that?
Thought, it's just another big case.
Okay. Did that in any way sway you one way or the other in this case?
No.
Part of the questionnaire also talked about the fact that we realize this is a hardship for people, in terms of taking time from work or wherever, whatever they're doing, family, et cetera, whatever plans they have. And we ask people to come and serve as jurors because that's part of being a citizen of this country, this state, this county. So taking that into account, that we realize it's an inconvenience, it's a hardship. The question is, the judge, let me backtrack a second. Both sides have estimated as best we can that this case will take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And also because of the desire on behalf of the court and all parties that there be no contact from outside forces in terms of media, et cetera, that the jurors be sequestered. So that means your contact with family, et cetera, will be limited. Do you understand?
Yes.
And you can agree to do that? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. That will not be an insurmountable hardship of any type?
No, if it's just up to 2 to 4 weeks, that
Okay.
won't affect me.
Okay. If I could have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
You mentioned in terms of something going on besides the trial, and I want to make sure I understood what you were saying about that. You used the word, what was going on outside, or? When you said that in addition to the case itself, there was something else going on related to the case? That people were in favor of Trayvon Martin?
Oh, yeah.
What did you mean in terms of what was going on?
Well, it was just on HLN. I don't remember the lady's name, but she seemed in favor of the Trayvon Martin side.
Okay. And was there something else going on in the community, like in Sanford or the Seminole County, related to the case? You remember anything going on?
No.
Okay. You remember any reporting, anything about anything related to that, like outside, just like what happened in court?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Afternoon, sir. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Just to give you a brief overview of the process here today. This part is what we call individual voir dire, just words that we use to say we get to talk to you outside of the other jurors, because if you were to know something about this case from outside the courtroom, from the media, or from your own research, we want to find out about it, but we don't necessarily want you in a setting where all the other jurors find out about it. So that's why we're talking to you individually. This is the prosecution side of the courtroom. This is the defense side. Of course, the judge gives us the rules and the rulings and help you inform you as to the law where you're to sit on a jury. So do you sort of get the reason why we're here and what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay. And the main purpose is to see what you do know about the case and what other influences may have been on you over the past year and a half that the case has been around, so that we can identify them. So I want to sort of look into that a little bit. Okay? You had mentioned that you found out about this case at school. So let's sort of go back in time. The event that brings us here today happened back on February 26th of 2012. You were still in school then, right?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me how or when, as best you can recall, the first time was you heard the first issue or matter about this case.
Somewhere within the second semester of my high school. I can't recall exactly what month, but it was towards the end of the year.
Okay. And what was it that you first heard?
Oh, I heard the basic knowledge about the case about George Zimmerman shooting Trayvon Martin, and some classmates were talking about it. And I also heard that Trayvon Martin didn't have anything dangerous on him, and I think that's...
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the conversations you had with classmates. First, was this when it first happened, or within the short time thereafter, was that a topic of conversation at your school?
No, it was just during one class. It was just talked about with a couple of students in there.
Okay. And can you tell me about that conversation?
They brought up the main issues, like, did Zimmerman have a right to shoot Trayvon Martin, or did Trayvon Martin do anything really suspicious to draw attention?
So tell me a bit more about who was saying what. We don't need to have actual names of your friends, but I want to get a better feel for the conversation, and then I want to know sort of your part in it.
Okay, this was a while ago, so I can't. A classmate had said, did you hear about the Zimmerman case? And some other kids were talking about it, like what happened. And pretty much what I said before is what.
And at that point, when they first mentioned it, you had not heard about the case at all?
Yes.
So when they first said it to you, if not their words, tell me the ideas that they communicated to you about their position on it, what they thought happened.
Well, some students would say that Trayvon Martin was innocent and Zimmerman didn't have a right to pursue him.
Okay. At that first conversation, were there any people or any arguments made or comments made to contradict that initial perspective?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So at that point, having just heard friends of yours, and I'm going to say sort of on the side or with the perspective that Trayvon Martin didn't do anything wrong, and that maybe George Zimmerman didn't have the right to shoot him, what were your thoughts?
Well, I didn't form an opinion just based on the little details that I knew about the case.
Sure. And the question here says, have you formed an opinion as to his guilt or innocence? And right?
Yes.
And you did not form that opinion back then?
No.
Okay. I'm a bit more curious not about this, what we call this ultimate question. You know, do you think he's guilty? Do you think he's innocent? But I'm trying to get a feel for when you first got this information, when the first flow of information came to you from some buddies at school, and it was all on the side that Trayvon Martin was innocent and George Zimmerman should not have done what he did, how that sort of fell on you.
Well, I went home, and that's when I really looked at the news, like watched the news, talked to my mom about it.
Okay. All right. So now you got the initial information from some buddies at school. Let's talk now about, you sort of went home to try and find out more about it. Is that close to accurate?
Yeah, a little. Just to turn on the news, look at what they're saying. And
Okay. And so when you went home, whether it was that day, that week, or at some point, and looked at the news, what did you find out from the news?
That day, I found out that Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin, and Trayvon Martin was unarmed.
Okay. And again, I don't want to put these words in your mouth. I'm going to say it in a way just to prompt a response. Was that first information you saw on the media, was that consistent with the perspective that your buddies had at school, that Trayvon Martin was innocent and George Zimmerman should not have shot him?
No, not the news I watched. It at that time, it didn't favor either or.
Okay, then tell me what it did say.
It just said there a man on Neighborhood Watch had been following Trayvon Martin and shot him, and that Trayvon Martin was not armed.
Okay. Did you know or have any experience with what Neighborhood Watch was when you first heard about it?
No.
Do you know what it is or isn't?
I know it's an organization Neighborhood would create to make sure procedures are followed within the neighborhood.
In your exposure to the media, did the media seem to think that that was something good for the community, or that it was something bad, what George Zimmerman was involved in if he was?
I didn't really get any opinion about that.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more then about the ongoing media exposure that you've had. We talked, I guess, about the first time. So tell me what else you remember.
I didn't watch much news after that up until summertime last year, and I haven't seen any news about it this year.
Okay. How about other conversations with your buddies at school?
No,
Nothing at all?
not within this year.
I'm sorry?
Not within this year.
I'm talking about last year, when it was you first had a conversation about it. You may have gone home to look at it a little bit more in detail in the news. I'm just curious whether or not it was what you said to your buddies when you next saw them about this case.
Well, we would talk about it a little bit more, talk about more of the details,
Okay.
like what I saw in the news that day.
All right. Tell me a little bit about those conversations.
It's just probably the same class, I think. I brought it up. I was like, Trayvon Martin wasn't armed. Zimmerman was on Neighborhood Watch. And kind of just exchanged details.
Okay. Was that conversation then sort of consistent with the first conversation that you had with your buddies?
Probably.
And was the consistency such that, again, Trayvon Martin was innocent and George Zimmerman should not or may not have had a reason to shoot him?
Yes.
Okay. How many times, if you had to guess, going back to was that your junior year?
Yes.
Okay. Going back to your junior year, about how many times did you have conversations with classmates, like we've just talked about these two? How many other conversations, if you had to guess?
Probably about 5 or 6.
Okay. In all of those conversations, and again, I'm going to sort of say something, but it may or may not be accurate. In all of those conversations, was it still consistent that everybody agreed that Trayvon Martin was innocent and that George Zimmerman may not have had a reason to shoot him.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the manner of the questions asked. It's supposed to ask him what was discussed.
I'll rephrase it, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I'll rephrase it. Do you understand when I talk about consistency in conversations?
Yes.
Okay. Those other conversations you said you had, maybe 4, 5, 6 of them, right?
Yes.
Were they pretty consistent with the first 2 we've talked about?
No, other friends thought that what Zimmerman did shouldn't result in jail time or any. They thought it was more self-defense.
Okay. I'd like to talk to you about those comments or conversations. So tell me about those conversations.
Well, one of my friends thought that it was just self-defense case because of that Trayvon Martin had attacked him prior to him shooting. So they thought that was mainly self-defense.
Had you questioned him or had any further interaction with him about what was meant by Trayvon Martin attacked him?
No, I think that he broke Zimmerman's nose before he shot him, and I think that's
Okay.
all I can recall.
And that's all you can recall. Was that something that was found out during these school conversations, or was that something that you had found out from your media exposure?
I was from media exposure.
So you had, tell me as best you can, I know we're going back 14, 15 months maybe, but tell me as best you can what you remember hearing from the media regarding Trayvon Martin breaking George Zimmerman's nose.
That's all I really know. I just remember that Trayvon Martin, I guess, felt scared and attacked him, and I think he hit his nose. I don't know if he punched his nose or if he used some object to hurt him.
Okay. And do you recall what source that information came from?
No.
But probably TV?
Yes.
Okay. When you found out that information about the nose, did you discuss that with the classmates at school?
No.
Was there any reason why that didn't come up?
I think it was summertime by the time I knew about that.
You said a little while ago that you went home and looked at the media a bit and talked to your mom. Tell me what you talked to your mom about regarding this case.
That was the initial day of hearing about it. I went home and kind of just like, did you hear about the Zimmerman case? Oh yeah. And we just talked a little bit about what happened.
Okay. What did she tell you from her perspective happened?
Told me that Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin and Trayvon Martin was unarmed, and that's all I can remember.
Okay. Was that fairly consistent then with what you had heard initially from your, I'm calling them buddies, I hope you don't mind that sort of slang term, but from your buddies at school, was it consistent with that?
Yes.
What else did your mom say about it?
I don't remember her saying much else about it on that day.
That first day?
Yeah.
Let's talk about additional conversations that you had with your mom.
We didn't really talk about it much after it first was on the news, unless, like, after a conversation with my friends, I might go home, she'll have the news on, we might talk about what's going on with the case.
Okay. Do you remember any additional specific conversations with your mom having anything to do with this case?
No.
Did you ever talk, have you ever shown your support in any formal way for either George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin?
No.
Have you signed any petitions?
No.
Donated any money?
No.
Has your mom suggested to you to do anything like that?
No.
Any conversations with her at all?
No.
about that?
No.
If I asked you in these conversations with your buddies at school, well, we talked about sort of junior year and then summertime. You didn't have as much communication with them, I guess, because school was out.
Yes.
How about this past year? Tell me about the conversations you had, if any, with buddies in school this year.
I couldn't recall any conversations this year about the case.
Okay. Was it any source of conversation in the school in general for assemblies or for announcements or for organizing things about one side or the other in the case?
No.
Nothing like that?
No.
If I asked you what percentage, and I know going back a year and a half, and there weren't that many of them, what percentage of your buddies were of the opinion that Trayvon Martin was innocent, what would you say?
I would say the majority, probably maybe 70%.
Do you connect yourself with that perspective?
No.
Has there been, we've talked about some of your friends who have said that that Trayvon Martin attacked George. Was there any other information that came to you from any source as far as maybe explaining why George Zimmerman did what he did?
No, all I heard from the news was that he had broke his nose. And
Have you seen any pictures of George Zimmerman?
no,
None whatsoever?
I've seen pictures of him, not of. I saw pictures of him at the initial, start of the case on the news.
Okay, can you describe those to me at all?
It seemed like it was a post arrest. Right after he was arrested, they showed pictures on the news.
Okay, and I wrote down post-arrest, but I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly what you mean.
It was a picture seen soon after he was arrested that night.
Could you describe the picture a little bit, maybe clothing that he was wearing?
No, I don't.
Okay. And have you seen any pictures of Trayvon Martin?
Yes.
And tell me about those.
It seemed like it was a picture more maybe a couple years ago before the incident occurred.
And why do you say that?
He just looked younger, and I think he was 17 when at the time. He didn't look that old.
So you understood to be 17 at the time of his passing. This picture seemed younger than that?
Yes.
Okay. Was it just one picture you saw or more?
I think I can only recall one picture.
I believe Mr. Dillery wanted to ask you about any other, what we call evidence, any other pieces of evidence, any other pictures, recordings, anything that may have come to you from the media or that friends talked to you about that you could recall here today relevant to this case?
The only thing that would come to mind was the I think they had on the news the conversation between Mr. Zimmerman and the police that night.
Okay. The recording of that, you mean?
Yes.
For our purposes, I'm going to call that the non-emergency call. Just, it will help us keep track of it because there are other calls out there that we may talk about. So in that non-emergency call, did you actually hear at least part of that on TV?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know whether or not it ran a few minutes? Do you know if you listened to the entire call?
No, just a few phrases.
Okay. And can you tell me, as best you can recall, what those phrases were that you did hear?
What I remember, it was Mr. Zimmerman. I called, said he was following a suspect, and the police told him that they didn't need him to do that. That's all I can remember.
Okay. Did you get anything? Did your mind take you anywhere when you listened to that, as far as what you thought may have been happening?
No,
Nothing at all?
just that Mr. Zimmerman was following Trayvon Martin.
Okay. As you heard that on the TV, did you think that what he had done at that point was improper?
Yes,
Okay.
to an extent.
Okay. The purpose of this is to make sure that those little, I'm going to call them predispositions. So right now you think that maybe George Zimmerman did something wrong because he followed him, maybe. What I want to make sure, and the whole purpose of this, is if you have that, but you don't hear information to support that from the witness box, right? And you don't have evidence to support that, whether or not you're going to have a difficulty in setting aside that thought that you had, which you learned from the media, and not from the courtroom. So how can you assure me that that's not going to be a concern of yours?
Well, just based on all the evidence that I know, one detail isn't gonna decide or form an opinion about it, either or.
Okay. The judge will instruct you that you're only to make your decision based upon evidence from the courtroom and nothing from the outside. Okay, would you be able to follow that?
Yes.
We've talked now. Anything else from that? Again, I'll call it the non-emergency call. Tell me what else you remember about that.
I don't remember anything else.
Okay. Any other recordings or pieces of evidence that you can sort of dig back and remember having heard at one point about this case?
I think Trayvon Martin was wearing a hoodie, and I was put up, so that made him look more suspicious, I guess.
Okay. Do you carry a concern that somebody who has a hoodie up and looks suspicious, would that be a problem for you?
No.
You'd also mentioned a bit about, I think, so correct me if these weren't your exact words, that during an answer to one of Mr. DeLorean's questions, you said that you knew that George Zimmerman had called the police.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I knew that just based on the recording I heard of the conversation he had with the police that I heard over the news.
Okay. That came from then your own understanding of listening to call, instead of coming from some other source, some other person, your mom or friends of yours. Is
Yeah,
that
it was from
correct?
a call, yes.
And then you'd mentioned just generally that you thought the media had favored the Trayvon Martin side of things. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me how that showed itself to you.
Well, I heard about riots and rants, maybe.
And when we're talking about the terminology used for riots and rants, you're talking about the marches or assemblies or
like marches and protests.
that happened in the Sanford area?
I don't know what area it was.
Tell me what you knew about those.
Just knew that a lot of people thought that Trayvon Martin was innocent, and that's all I know about him.
Okay. Was there anything that came across to you in what you identified as riots or rants that was concerning as far as public safety or Mrs. Zimmerman's safety?
No.
Did you have any concerns based upon those?
No.
And a couple more questions about contact you had with your mom regarding this. Had this ever been a point of conversation in the home in the past year with your mom?
Last year, yeah, probably towards the end of last year.
And tell me about those conversations.
Just like as more details would come in through the news, we'd talk about it. Like that Zimmerman had been attacked, and that that's pretty much it.
Okay. And tell me overall then her perspective on this case.
She didn't seem to express opinion favoring one side or another.
I have just a moment. Regarding your mom's perspective to you, did she ever give you any insight or suggest to you that she had signed a petition or supported either Trayvon Martin or George Zimmerman or donated any money?
No.
Thanks, nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
And if you'll remain seated for just one moment, the council, when you're ready, approach. Please be seated. Good afternoon. And you will be continued to be referred to as juror I-19. And the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire you filled out a week ago Tuesday, okay? All right, take a deep breath. And Mr. De La Ronda will begin. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
As Judge Nelson stated, we're going to be asking you some questions about what you know or don't know in terms of from the media, okay? And the big thing is, since we're in a courtroom and there's a court reporter right in front of you, that you need to answer yes or no, because I can tell by you nodding your head, you're saying yes, but do you understand? We're all
Yes.
used to talking by nodding our heads.
Yes.
Or shaking our heads. We had an opportunity to read the questionnaire and you put on here, I heard about the news about Trayvon Martin being shot by a man on Neighborhood Watch.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. I-19, I'm sorry. Well, tell me what you remember hearing about the case.
I just know bare minimum about the case. I don't watch the news. What I heard from or about the case is what I've heard from my mother, who watches the news. I don't.
Okay. I'm sorry, you put down Zimmerman potentially killed Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
Okay. And is that from your mother?
Yes.
Okay. What else did she tell you other than that?
Nothing.
Tell me what you can, was it at the time it happened or was it more recently?
Yeah. Once it happened, that's when I heard about it.
Okay. And you lived with your mother?
Yes.
Okay. Did she tell you anything else related to the case?
No.
When you say potentially, when you use the word potentially, when you wrote it
Allegedly.
down, what does that mean?
Allegedly, I don't.
Okay. You don't know?
I don't know.
Okay. And did your mother use the word potentially, or is that just your word when you're paraphrasing what your mother
Just
said?
paraphrasing.
Okay. So I gather you do not watch the news at
No.
all?
No.
Do you remember looking at any photographs at any time, or your mother telling you about photographs?
I remember seeing some photos of Trayvon Martin and Zimmerman on the news, like as I was passing by, but
Sure.
I'm not
Okay.
watching it.
What do you remember the photos of Mr. Zimmerman looking like?
I guess just the mugshot, I guess, that
Okay.
one.
When you say mugshot, what do you mean by that?
It was him looking in a camera, just frowning.
I'm
That
sorry.
one. The one that's used on the news everywhere.
Okay, all right. And how about any other photographs of Mr. Zimmerman?
No.
How about of Trayvon Martin?
I've seen just like various pictures of him. Like saw one with him with a hat and like a peace line, I guess, and then a couple others, but I can't really remember.
Do you remember your mother telling you anything related to the case, like what was
No.
happening in court, or you remember either hearing from your mother or anybody else, or
No.
just when you walked by by your mother while she was watching TV, anything about the case, like whether there's any recordings or videos or
No.
anything that happened in court at all?
No.
Are you one of those individuals that just doesn't,
I
you
have
got too
no
much
interest-
going on?
Yeah, I have no interest in watching the news.
Okay. If somebody were to come out of town, from out of town, and you weren't a juror, and it was a good friend of yours and said, I've been out of town, I've been in, Australia,
Mhm.
okay? And they just got back into town. I said, what is this all about? What would you tell them?
I wouldn't really have anything to say. I would just say what was on my questionnaire. Like, I just know this much and that's it.
Okay. You got the summons, right, about a month ago, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Did you do any research about what potentially was going on?
No.
You had no interest in
No,
that?
I had no interest.
You excited about being here?
No,
Okay. I guess this is your first time, right?
it is.
Okay. What I'm trying to do as best I can,
Yeah.
try to find out what you may have been exposed to.
I
So we
understand.
can kind of talk about it, and the bottom line, you have stated in your questionnaire that you have not formed an opinion as to
Can't form
the
an
guilt
opinion.
or innocence of Mr. Zimmerman because you don't know anything.
Yeah.
Can you agree to listen to what the evidence happens in the courtroom
I
and make a
can.
decision about that?
Mhm.
Okay, now how about at work? Anybody at work talk about the case? And don't tell us where you work because I've got it here, we all
Yeah.
know.
I don't want to repeat it either. My boss is extremely interested in the case, but I usually walk away whenever I'm around here.
Okay,
She thinks it's very interesting.
sure. And what I'm talking about is prior to you getting the summons.
Oh, no. No. Mm-mm.
Any talk by your boss about what was going on?
Mm-mm.
Even
No.
like, okay, this is what happened today, or this case is about, whatever.
No.
Okay. Now, we realize that when we ask, let me go on the internet. You don't do any Facebook or any of that stuff?
I mean, I have a Facebook, but I don't research the case.
Okay. I don't have Facebook, so I'm talking out of ignorance, but my kids and wife do. Apparently you can, on Facebook, there's like a drop down, you're able to get news or something. Is that true or not? No?
When I don't watch the news, I don't read the news, I don't.
No,
I know, I
on
don't.
Facebook, or is there like a drop down or some kind of thing where you can kind of look at the news?
I'm sure there is.
But you've never done it?
No.
How about on YouTube or other kind of social media where people comment about the case or not? Have you ever run across anything related to the case?
I probably run across a couple of stuff, but I don't stop to read it. I just kind of keep going.
Okay. And why is it that you don't stop to read it?
I don't have any
Okay.
care about it.
Okay. Back last year when it happened, February, did you hear at all about it last year?
I heard about it, but
Okay.
I never just stopped, sat down,
Right.
like watched the full story.
Sure. What do you remember hearing about it when it first happened?
I honestly can't remember.
Okay. And when you heard about it, was that from just walking by your parents' mom as she was watching TV, or is that just from your mother telling you, oh, there's a case here, that's interesting?
Probably from her, and then as I was walking past the TV, if it was on the news, I
Sure.
would vaguely hear about it, but
Okay. Do you remember anything else in terms of what was going on in the community around, whether there was any talk by anybody out there other than what was on TV? In other words, you remember?
I remember hearing about like memorial services for Trayvon, but other than that, that's
Okay. Anything else that you remember? How about recently? Anything in the news recently? Did your mother tell you, yeah? Besides telling her, besides, I'm assuming telling you got jury duty. Anything else prior to that
no.
that she told you, like, this is what's been happening in court, anything like that?
No.
Okay. And we realize that when you ask jurors to serve as jurors, that it's an inconvenience, a hardship. And that's the only way our system, as you know, works. We ask people to make a sacrifice.
Right.
And the court is, well, first of all, both sides have estimated that once a jury is picked, it should take about 2 to 4 weeks to try the case. And since the court wants to make sure that there's no exposure from the jurors, from the media, that the jury will be sequestered. So your contact with family stuff is severely limited.
Right.
On purpose. You understand that?
Yes, I do.
And that would not be a hardship to you, as I understand it, correct?
Talking to people won't be a hardship. It's just I have to work. I'm not getting paid to be here, so that's the only hardship that I have.
And we realize we've had that problem with people before.
Right.
And we realize it's a hardship.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess the question is only you can answer is it going to be, I don't mean to get personal, but do you live with your mother or with parents? Or?
I live with my mother, yes.
Okay, all right. And we've already had other jurors express that it is a hardship for them. The question is whether it's just going to be insurmountable. Do you understand?
Yes.
You think it will be?
It's just like, since I get paid hourly and like a low hourly, if it's like every day like this, I don't know how I'm gonna pay the bills at the end of the month if I'm just continuously here. She doesn't help me. Just because I live with her doesn't mean she helps me. So that's the only concern I have.
No, and we realize that we've had other people, had all kinds of hardships, okay, give me a moment, Your Honor. Good. You mentioned your boss at some point said something to you about the case.
No, she just says that she's jealous because she would rather be here.
Oh, she wants to be a juror.
She wants to be here.
Okay.
She thinks it's very interesting, but other than that, once she starts I see that she's getting too excited about it and wants to start talking about it, I walk away.
Did she kind of verbalize or indicate an opinion one way or the other?
No, she just says she really would
Is she
rather
one of those
be.
people that just loves these kind of stuff?
Her and her girlfriend, always, they go out of their way to be a part of jury.
You talking about they watch the shows, or they just kind of?
They watch the shows, but then they try to be a part of jury duty. I know she said that her girlfriend had done something so she would have the opportunity to be picked more frequently than everybody else.
I guess it's some way of volunteering more often or
I
something.
get
I
it.
don't-
Mhm.
Anything else you can think of that she told you? Did she ever express an opinion like, Mr. Zimmerman's guilty or?
I think she said it
innocent?
could go either way. She never really gave her opinion. She just,
Okay. Anybody else that you can think of that may have mentioned to you their feelings about the case one way or the other?
no.
Anything else you can think of that we should know in terms of your exposure to the media? Or I guess you haven't formed an opinion.
I haven't
correct?
formed an opinion.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. West.
I'm sorry, may I have one follow-up question? I apologize. Have you checked at all in terms of when you say a hardship, a potential hardship at work, with your boss at all in terms of whether accommodations can be made?
Well, I switched shifts for today. Like, I can do that, but want to get as many hours
Right,
as I
right,
can.
no, because a lot of times employers, since they realize, the civic responsibility of people and also the employers themselves, they make accommodations that you check to see whether they would in some
I can
way-
ask her, but I don't know if that's really going to happen.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta go even to a higher boss in terms of finding out. I'm not saying.
I can ask the owner of my
Okay.
job, yeah.
So you haven't asked the owner in terms of whether they. can
I don't
accommodate?
communicate with him.
I'm sorry?
I don't communicate with him.
Okay. Or you can ask the manager to ask the owner, I guess?
I
or-
can.
Okay. And just in my experience, a lot of times, most companies or most places where people work can try to make accommodations because they realize they have a civic responsibility too.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West.
One second. Sorry, 1 second.
That's fine.
Thanks. Okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath now. Let's, first of all, just some general overview of what we're doing here. I know you've already missed several days of work, I take it, because of this.
Well, yesterday was my day off, but unfortunately the other 3 days that I've been here, it was during work, but I was at least able to make one of my work shifts last time. So I've only missed like 2 days of work because I've been able to move stuff around, but I don't know how long that's going to be able to continue on.
Would you have to work, if you were here during, well, let me get back to that in a different way. So now you've missed 2 or 3 days?
Yeah.
And you only get paid by the hour?
Yes.
You don't get paid anything if you don't go to work?
Right.
You seem a little stressed.
No,
That's-
I'm cold, I'm sorry.
Tell me, though, about the financial aspect. What happens to you if you miss several days, weeks, or perhaps as much as a month of work?
Well, I owe a certain amount of money, obviously, every month throughout my bills, and I don't get any help, really. And, I mean, even if it's like 2 to 4 weeks, I could try to get help, but it's not really, I'm the only one who can pay it, and if I miss anything, then I'm not going to be able to get any money. At least this pay period.
I'm sorry.
At least like per pay period, because I
Right.
get paid every 2 weeks.
You wouldn't be able to work at all if you were on the jury. It's not like you could pick up an extra shift
Yeah.
or anything. So when we talk about 2 to 4 weeks, we're
Yeah.
talking about after the trial itself starts. That's where the 2 to 4 weeks begins.
Right.
That doesn't include any of the time that you've already spent or that you might miss the rest of this week.
Right.
Okay. So are you worried that if you missed a
Very much
month-
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you don't really have anybody that can cover your bills for you while you're gone?
No.
Would that create some stress for you?
A little bit, but I mean, I would try to work it out. I could ask my family, and I could, again, ask my company to see if there's anything that they would be able to do to help me.
Have you asked them yet?
I only asked if I would get paid to be here, and they said no, and I haven't really ventured to ask them any further.
Okay, when you asked them if you'd be paid to be here, did they tell you?
They told me no.
What do you think might be different than that if you asked them again?
I mean, I don't really know. I would have to ask, again, the owner of the company to see if he would be able to do anything, because it would be up to him.
Okay, and you haven't done that yet?
No.
When you asked them about it, whether you would be paid for jury, for being on the jury, their initial reaction was no?
Yeah, I just asked her. I asked my boss through a text message, and she just said no, that we don't do that.
Okay. If you found yourself in a position of not being able to work for a month and not being paid by work, what kind of hardship would that be for you?
It would be an extreme one, because I wouldn't be able to pay anything. So.
Do you have recurring bills that you're expected to pay each month?
Yes.
If you lost a month's worth of income, would that put you sort of in a very dire situation financially?
It would be very tight, and it would be very unfortunate. So I would have to see what I would have to do. Like, if I went home tonight and I tried to ask and see where I could get finances from, but I haven't prepared that far.
Okay. Let me just explore a little bit of that with you. Do you think you might be able to? Are you optimistic that maybe your mother could cover your bills?
I don't think that she would really be able to, because, I mean, she doesn't ask me to pay rent or anything of the bills, because she knows I couldn't afford anything further than what I have to pay, and for her to cover herself, mine, my brother's, it would just, I don't think she'd be able to pay all of it.
Yeah. So what are you thinking in terms of making arrangements? Do you have other family or friends that would pay your expenses for you, do you think?
I mean, I could probably ask my grandparents, but again, they're both retired, so whatever money comes from them would be little.
You're not sure they would have the resources to pay their bills and yours too?
Right.
At this point, you haven't tried yet to see?
Right.
Okay. Anything else come to mind? And I'm not trying to make, I'm not trying to get a firm commitment, but we have to explore this possibility.
Yeah.
So at this point, is it fair to say that you couldn't do this on your own?
Right.
And you don't know at this point whether you could get any help from anybody?
Right.
When do you think you would know?
Probably by tomorrow. I only have to ask a couple people to see what they would say.
Okay. Let me talk about some other stuff.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your
No
candor.
problem.
I'm sure that's not comfortable to just talk
It's
about.
fine.
So, this part of the jury selection process is pretty narrow. It's limited to hardship issues, financial or otherwise.
Right.
And then what people know about the case already. You know, in some cases, people have never heard of it.
Right.
And then in other cases, it seems like everybody's heard at least something.
Right.
So you fit in that category of having heard at least something.
Right.
And now we're trying to figure out how much, what, if any, effect it may have had, and what, how that might impact if on your possibility as a juror.
Right.
Following along so far?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, do you consciously avoid listening to the news?
Yes.
Okay. Some people have said it's too depressing.
Well, I just have other things I'd rather be focusing on than sad news, so.
So if you have free time,
No,
you
I
don't
don't.
pick up a newspaper?
No.
Or turn on one of the cable news stations?
No.
Do you have cable TV at home?
I do.
Do you know if you have Channel 13
I
The
do.
Bright House channel?
Yes.
Have you ever watched that station ever?
No.
So you wouldn't even have had a passing moment connected with this case and Channel 13?
Not really, no.
Okay. Do you use the internet to look for headlines or anything that might connect you with current events?
No.
I think you said you have a brother. Do you have other brothers and sisters?
No, just one.
Do you and he talk about current events at all?
No.
Is he older or younger?
Younger.
But how old is he?
He's 16.
When this case started,
Mhm.
him being 16, for example, would he have mentioned anything to you
No.
about a young man being shot and killed?
No.
When your mother mentioned it to you,
Mhm.
did she say anything? Hey, that kid was about your brother's age.
No.
When she said to you, this is a story that's in the news, did she say how the incident happened? And I don't mean details, but where were these guys when this happened, or what's generally thought may have taken place?
She didn't say anything about where. She just said that a boy was shot, and not much more than that.
Mhm. Did she use any names?
I don't think she used names. I know about the names because I have heard about it. You can't help but hear about it sometimes.
Mhm. Did you know anything at all about it when she mentioned it to you?
No.
Do you know what made it newsworthy to her?
No.
It's a sad fact of life that people get killed
Yes.
and people get shot and killed.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if, under all sorts of circumstances, would you agree with that?
Yes.
The fact that somebody was shot and killed in and of itself doesn't necessarily make it significant.
Objection, I'm not asking for her knowledge of media that he's now testifying.
Okay, can you tie it up to media? Thank you.
Yes. Do you agree with that generally?
Generally, yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm wondering about with your mother. Do you have any idea why she thought this particular story was important to herself or important for you to know about?
She could have been just commenting about it to me because it was such a big deal in the news. Maybe she just felt the need to share it, pass it on.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm wondering. Do you know why she thought it was a big deal?
I don't.
Did she ever say there's a community reaction to
No.
this? No discussion whatsoever about that?
No.
Do you have any idea whether there was a community reaction at some point to these events?
I heard that there was a community reaction, but
Mhm.
that's as far as I know about that.
Okay. What did you hear about the community reaction?
I heard that they had gone through like links to go some people had issued walks in like honor of the deceased, stuff like that, but other than that, nothing much more.
Okay. This process is sort of trying to mine some information. There's no right or wrong answers.
Right.
And we all know from having done this for well over a week that sometimes we say something that triggers a memory.
Right.
So we have to rely on you just to tell us whatever memories you have and from whatever perspective. There's absolutely nothing wrong about knowing of the case.
Okay.
In fact, some people say you'd have to live under a rock not to have ever heard about it.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk for a moment, if we might, about the, did you say memorial service, or were you talking about a community reaction and a march or a walk of some sort?
The march and the walk. Like I heard that they were honoring the deceased or.
Okay, tell me just a little bit more, if you know, when you
There's-
say they were honoring the deceased.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
everyone who lived in the community or whoever supported that side, or I don't know much more than that.
Did you get a sense that this was a big deal in some way?
Since it's still going on, I guess so, but
Mhm.
other than that,
Did you know anything about where the walks or marches took place?
no,
Do you know if there were any here
no,
in Sanford?
no.
Do you know if any of them took place outside the area?
I would assume that they would take place somewhere, but I don't know where.
Okay. How about why the marches or walks took place? Do you have any sense of why or how that happened?
Well, I would assume that they, took that side, that particular side,
Mhm. And what do you mean by taking a side? What's your sense of the division, that there's one side or the other?
they probably, like, diehard, like, think he did it, and they were trying to honor Trayvon Martin versus just honoring the deceased or something like that.
Do you have any idea why there would have been so much activity and so much organization if it was just to honor the deceased?
No.
Did your mom ever mention anything to you after that first conversation that pointed out the idea that there's marches, or
No.
how about after it got underway? Did you ever talk to your brother about it?
No. He has probably even less interest in the news than I do.
Uh-huh. How about the idea that whatever happened right here in this community, as opposed to what you might hear in the news in some other state or some other country? Did that mean anything to you?
No.
Have you ever had any conversations about the case at any social organizations or church or anything like that?
No.
How about at work? Did I understand that the person you're talking about that kind of wants to get on a jury is someone you work with?
Yes, she's my boss. She's the operations manager of the store.
You'd probably like to trade places with her right now.
I really would.
You told her that you had a summons for this case?
Yeah.
When you first got the summons,
Mhm.
did you have any idea that it was possibly for this case?
No, my mom did though, because she said she heard on the news that there was a lot of summons that went out and that
Oh.
it was for this case in particular.
Uh-huh. And what did she say about that?
She didn't like it because she knew I'd be missing work.
Uh-huh. Did that prompt her to make any more comments about the case
No.
to you? Did you say to her, for example, wow, I don't know anything about this. What's the big deal?
She
Or-
knows that I don't know anything about it because she knows that I don't watch the news.
Right. That's why I'm interested that once she connected the dots and said, hey, this might be on the Zimmerman case,
Mm-hmm.
and you might be a possible juror on it, she would have known that you didn't know anything about it.
Right.
Would she have said to you, or would you have said to her, well, what's the Zimmerman case? What are we talking about here? Why is it a big deal?
I mean, I've heard of the case, but
Mhm.
I never really cared too much to read anything about it. And even once she told me and she connected the dots, I still did not care enough to go out and research anything about this case.
Sure. No, I think that's a smart thing to do. In fact, now you're under court order not to do it.
Yeah.
But when you were having this conversation with your mother, did she say anything? Well, Zimmerman case is that one involving that kid that was shot, and you remember.
Yeah. No.
None of that.
Because she probably knows that I know like bare minimum about the case, but she's just trying to help me, or she wants me to get out of this.
So your mother doesn't want you to serve.
No.
It may make her a little less interested in financing it then.
she just does not want me to be here because she knows that she can't help pay all of it, and she knows that if I'm here, I won't be able to pay my bills. She's already trying to get me to quit my job and get a higher paying one as it is.
Yeah. So in terms of the people to ask that are likely to be able to help you pay your bills if you're on the jury, you've pretty well excluded your mother as a possibility.
She'd be able to pay like some of it, but she wouldn't be able to pay all of it.
And do you think she would even be willing?
She would have to get over it if it comes time for it, but she's not going to be happy about it.
Well, if you went home and you asked her, hey, Mom, I might be on this jury and it might be for a month. And I know you don't want me to be on the jury anyway, but if I am, would you pay my bills for the next month? What do you think her answer would be?
Not good.
Okay. But you're willing to give it a shot?
I'm willing to give it a shot.
When you first heard this and you knew about the case, you knew apparently about a memorial service and such, what was your initial impression?
That's sad that he died, but again, like I don't know him, so it's not like I can really form that much of an emotional attachment to anything regarding this.
Sure. What was your reaction about George Zimmerman as the person who was accused of killing Trayvon Martin?
Someone who killed someone. I didn't go much further beyond facts.
Did you think it might be sad for him if he wasn't guilty?
Sure.
Again, interjecting versus what she knows about.
Okay, sustained.
Did you give any thought, based upon what you heard, how that accusation might impact George Zimmerman?
Well, when I heard about it from the get-go, he was the person who killed someone, and I didn't assume it would go on so long, so I just was like, okay, he's going to jail, and Trayvon's dead, but I didn't really think too much outside of that. I just assumed that it was going to be over and he was going to jail. I didn't actually realize that it was still going on until people just kept talking about it.
Was your initial reaction that something must have happened and he would be going to jail?
Sure, yeah.
Does that mean that your initial reaction to what you heard on the news anyway was that George Zimmerman had done something wrong?
I guess, yeah.
Did you ever change your mind on that?
I don't know anything about the case, so I don't really know if he is in the wrong or if he isn't. That's what.
Fair enough, that's what I'm saying. We're just trying to figure out what the impressions were and what, if any, effect it might have. So, if I understand correctly, your initial impression was it was very sad that Trayvon Martin died.
Right.
And that your impression was that George Zimmerman had probably done something wrong.
Right.
In conversations with your mother or hearing more about it, did you ever change your mind on that?
Not really, because I never really stopped to think about it and go over anything to really form an opinion about the case or what was going on.
But is that, all other things aside, based upon what you know from the news and such, is that how you still feel?
Objection, ask and answer.
She can answer this question. Go ahead and answer.
I guess I don't really know much about the case nor care.
Of course. You could never know more about the case than you know.
Right.
Okay, so based upon what you know, that's still how you feel.
Right.
Once you got here and you were told, hey, don't talk about it.
Right.
And you haven't.
Right.
Should I assume that you didn't attend any of the walks or marches?
No, I didn't.
Or did you ever visit the memorial site
No, I
or
didn't.
attend any service or anything?
No.
In any of the information on the case, however limited, did you ever hear or see any press conferences involving anyone connected with the case, such as
No.
the Martin family, the prosecutor, lawyers for anybody involved?
No.
Did your mom ever talk with you about that?
No.
Did your mom ever say that that she supported the
No.
Trayvon Martin side of things by giving money or by signing a petition or by doing something that would show her support for one side or the other?
No.
May I have just a second, Judge? Sorry.
That's fine.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's all the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If you'll remain seated for just a moment, and counsel will approach when you're ready. If you'll please follow Corporal Debs outside the courtroom, and please bring in the next juror.
Your Honor, I-24 is present.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. You will continue to be known as Juror I-24. The attorneys are going to ask you some questions about the questionnaire you filled out last Tuesday, and we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda. You may proceed.
Please support. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to refer to you either as ma'am or I-24. I hope that's all right.
That's fine.
This part of the jury process is where we're trying to find out what witnesses, or I'm sorry, what jurors' exposure has been to the media. So I'm going to ask you some about that and whether that would in any way cause you to favor one side or the other. We start off by stating that you have answered a question that you have not formed an opinion as to the defendant's guilt or innocence. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You also stated that where you please briefly write out what you had heard, and you were very brief, you said TV, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you I'm going to try to develop that a little bit more in terms of what you remember.
Okay.
But your source of information from this case is from TV?
Yes.
Okay. And would that have been both from local and national?
Mostly local.
Okay. Do you recall what particular station you may have heard most of the knowledge you have about this case from?
A little bit of all of them, but
Okay.
probably Fox.
And your knowledge of this case, was it obtained at the very beginning when this occurred back last year? It happened back in February 26th of 2012. Would it have been around that time? And has it continued throughout is what I'm trying to ask.
Probably in the beginning, maybe a little bit later, and then I just kind of tuned out.
Okay. So let me, if I could, kind of expand on that a little bit, have you elaborate a little bit more about that. You would have paid close attention, I guess, or attention when it first happened?
I don't know as so much attention as just to see what was going on.
Sure, okay. Are you one of those TV watchers or news watchers where you're probably real religious in terms of watching TV every night or in the morning, in terms of the news?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have time for reading newspapers.
Okay. So you kind of get the lowdown from what they tell you on TV?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, all right. And what do you recall in terms of what occurred here? Do you recall, if you can just kind of tell me what you remember?
That a young man was shot and killed.
Okay.
That it was in a subdivision.
Okay.
That it was somebody who was patrolling that subdivision.
Okay. Anything else?
Primarily to begin with that.
Okay, all right. And then I gather, since you live in this community, if it appeared again, you would have watched it, I guess, when it happened, in terms of whatever other news follow-up there were related to the case?
When I had time.
When you had time, not you were one of those that was, anytime you had to go, you had to be home at a certain time in order to watch it.
No, I work.
Okay. And just for purposes of your understanding, we know where you work, you put it down here, so you don't have to tell us again. Did you keep up with any of the court proceedings in terms of what was going on in the case?
No.
Okay. Do you recall, in terms of your information that you obtained from the media, whether you had come across of any photographs related to this case that you would have seen on TV?
No.
Okay.
I did, excuse me.
Okay, that's all right.
Only in the beginning where they had said that the young man had been shot and that Mr. Zimmerman had not been injured in any way, and then later on they showed his injuries, that he
Okay.
did sustain some injuries.
Okay. So at the beginning, Did you say you looked at photographs that show he did not have no injuries, or they said he didn't have no
They
injuries?
said that he had no injury.
And that would have been a commentator, I gather, on TV?
The news, the media.
Okay, somebody in the news?
Mhm.
Okay. And then you said subsequent to that, something about injuries that he had sustained?
Yeah, that he had. And I did see a picture of his face, that he had a bruise on his head and some bruises on his face.
Okay. So bruise on his head, do you remember what part of the head?
I believe it was on the back of his head.
Okay.
And then somewhere on, like, his nose or
Sure,
whatever.
okay, all right. And did you say that was recently?
No.
Okay.
That
When
a
was
while
that?
back.
How
That was a
long ago
while
was that?
back.
You talking about last year?
Probably last year, the beginning of this year.
Okay. Did you form an impression as a result of that?
Yeah, that the media makes a lot of stories for
Okay.
a good story.
Okay. Let's see if we can start off with a premise. Do you believe everything you see in the media, either
No.
photographs or commentary or whatever else you would have seen?
No,
Okay. Do you understand under the law, for people to serve as jurors, they have to agree to set aside whatever they've seen on TV and only make your decision on what actually happens in the courtroom?
yes,
Do you agree with that principle?
definitely.
Okay. Can you agree that you would apply that principle to your actions as a juror in this case?
Yes,
Okay. And the reason we asked is that, and the reason we're inquiring now is to kind of get an idea of what you've seen. And then obviously the end result is, can you agree to set that aside? And then if you agree to set aside, as we're discussing now, if by chance you're serving as a juror and then something pops up in your mind that you remember seeing on TV or somebody talking about it, whether that would influence you another way, in any way in arriving at your decision, you believe it would not?
no, it would
Okay.
not.
All right, let's talk, if we can, more about the exposure you would have had from TV. Do you recall any kind of recordings related to this case? Anything that you would have heard? And I'm not saying that there is. I can't tell you, okay, there's
No.
recording 1, 2, and 3, or there was a blue car. I can't feed you information. I'm not saying
No.
that there is. You don't recall any kind of recording or anything like that? Anything regarding if there was a videotape of any type? Do you recall any about that?
No,
Okay. Do you recall any commentary in terms of, or actual events that happened in the courtroom where there would have been filming of some kind of story about this is what happened in courtroom today, you know, on May whatever, this is what happened, or last November, et cetera?
no, I don't have time for,
Okay, all right. Did you discuss the matter with any friends or family? When I say the matter, the case or any aspects of the case?
well, I mean, we did have some people at work discuss
Sure,
about it.
okay, okay. And did the people at work provide you any more insight in terms of what they had seen on TV or what they read in the newspaper or whatever they did?
No, just their feelings of
Okay.
if they felt that
Right.
Mr. Zimmerman was innocent or guilty.
Okay, and if you can, how many people did you talk to about? Was it just a few, or was it, I know where you work, so you don't have to tell me who, but I'm just saying, were there a
Well, I
bunch of
work
people?
I work in a small office, so I would
Okay.
say maybe 2 or 3 people,
Okay.
4.
Sure, and were they all in agreement as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant, or did they all take one side or the other?
Most of them took one side,
Okay, and which side did they take?
guilty.
I'm sorry.
Guilty.
Okay, all right. And did you argue with them as to whether he was guilty or not?
No, I just told them that there's probably a lot that they don't know about this case, and they're just jumping to conclusions.
Sure, okay. And you still believe that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so you have not formulated an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of?
No, sir, I have
Okay,
not.
all right. When these co-workers were telling you that they felt Mr. Zimmerman was guilty, did they in some way tell you why they thought he was guilty, in other words? Or did they just say guilty? Or did they say he's guilty because of ABC?
No, primarily when it came on TV, they would say, he's got to be guilty. That's about it. We didn't have time to get into it.
Was it, did you all see it on TV? Or is it just people telling you what they had seen on TV at home? Or
No, we have a television in our office,
okay.
and
And so-
occasionally.
Sure, okay. And I'm not
We
saying that you're not
rarely
working.
had it on, but occasionally.
I am not implying in any way that you weren't working. I'm talking about occasionally, if people at work, sometimes the TV comes on or something, and you kind of glance at it.
Yes.
Okay. In discussions, when that happened, you know, every once in a while, did people would say, oh, he's guilty, and you kind of kept quiet, or you didn't express an opinion, or just other than we need to keep an open mind, or how did you?
I just told them that what I felt, which was that they just did not know the whole story, and they were jumping to conclusions before they knew all of the facts.
Okay.
And then I never gave my opinion.
Sure. Okay. Now, these individuals at work, the 2 or 3 individuals that expressed their opinion, did they say something besides the word guilty? I guess what I'm saying is that they say he's guilty because of.
No.
Okay, at all, they just, okay. How about at home, family, or anything like that? Any discussions with family members about whether, what they had heard or seen on TV?
No.
Okay. And was that on purpose, or you just don't discuss it with family, or nobody discussed it?
I mean, we watched it,
Okay.
you listen to the news, and,
Okay.
I mean, it's like when you watch a movie. You
Sure.
watch the movie, you say, I enjoyed it, and
Okay,
that's about it.
sure, okay. Did you do any kind of, or do you partake in Facebook or any of the social media?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't, I'm
Okay.
not very good at getting into
Sure.
that.
Okay, so you did not do any research about this case, or
No.
look out there and see what was out there in the web's field in terms of what commentary there was?
Well, my children are the ones that get me on Facebook once in a blue moon. Otherwise,
Okay.
I doubt I'd find it.
Did any of your kids tell you anything about their opinions about the case, or, Mom, let me tell you what came out in the news today, or what I saw on Facebook today, or whatever?
No, they're too interested in their own lives.
Okay. If you weren't on a jury and you had a close friend who you hadn't seen in 5 years, and they decided to say, hey, can I come visit you, where you live? You say, sure. And they came to town, and you weren't on the jury.
I was not on the
And
jury.
you were not on the jury, so
Okay.
you would be allowed to talk about it.
Okay.
So you're not violating the court's law instruction about not talking about it, so you weren't on the jury, assume this. And your friend said, what's going on here? What is this case all about? What would you tell them?
I would probably tell them that a young man lost his life, and another man is fighting for his life.
Okay. And if they were to ask you as follow-up, as a good friend might ask you, well, what do you mean? What happened? What would you tell them?
I would tell them the little I know, and that's that Mr. Zimmerman shot a young man in what the media has said in defense of his life.
Okay. Now, in terms of what you would tell them in terms of defense of his life, is that based on what the media has said, or what you've heard? I guess you've heard that
A
on the
little
media?
bit of both, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And what if specifically have you heard on the media that this was in defense of his life?
I guess that Trayvon Martin was in his neighborhood.
Okay. And I'm not trying to get you to guess, I'm just trying to get you to remember.
No,
as best
just
you-
that he was in his neighborhood, and I guess some incident caused him to
Okay.
feel that he needed to defend himself.
Okay. Anything more about what happened in terms of the details of how Mr. Martin was killed?
He was shot.
Okay. Anything about how the shooting occurred? What led up to the shooting?
I don't think they really went into that, other
And-
than.
and if you don't know, I'm
He
just-
was in the neighborhood,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I guess Mr. Zimmerman thought it was suspicious.
Okay. And is that just you kind of assuming right now, or is that what the media says?
Somewhat of what the media says.
Okay. And see, what I'm trying to do is get in here in terms of what you remember in some way, hopefully asking you some questions to kind of get you to think back. Anything else you can remember about that Mr. Zimmerman thought he was suspicious? Anything more related to that?
No.
Anything more about the circumstances surrounding that? What happened or anything like that? Okay. Do you recall any other events going on in the community related to this case at all? Either at the time it happened, shortly thereafter, or now? And I'm not saying that there was, I'm just saying what you remember, if there was anything going on that was covered in the media in any way related to this case?
No. I don't think I quite understand what you're saying.
I'm trying to
Is
be
it something that when it happened, or
Right,
something
right.
in
Yeah,
the
right.
vicinity of
Sure,
where it
well-
happened? I do know that the young man had gone to the store
Okay,
to get a drink, and
okay.
that's,
Yeah, and what happens in this process, legally, the attorneys from either side cannot like feed you information and say, and this is hypothetical, this is really to happen. There was a blue car. Did you understand that there was a blue car? And you go, no. Well, now I've told you that there was a blue car. You understand? I'm not allowed to give you information and then say, oh, now that you've heard it, can you be fair?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to ask you what you know, and hopefully I'm asking you in a way that it prods your mind in terms of your memory, in terms of what you remember. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That might be why some of the questions are, you're not understanding what I'm asking, because I'm trying to, as best I can, without telling you the answer, getting you to tell me what you remember. Do you understand?
yeah, I do.
Okay. You mentioned that you heard that the young man had gone to the store. Do you remember what store it was or anything?
No.
Okay. Anything else that you can remember related to what happened that when Mr. Martin was shot?
Primarily that it was something of a neighborhood watch.
Okay. And you gathered that from the media. And who was involved in the neighborhood watch? Do you recall what the media said?
No. Just that Mr. Zimmerman was involved in like a neighborhood watch.
Okay. Anything else, other aspect of that you recall? Okay. And if you don't remember, that's fine. Now, anything aside from when it happened, anything in terms of the community, any discussions that you recall in the community, anybody having discussions about, or any kind of commentary about that in the community at all, in Seminole County, related to what had happened?
Other than his parents?
Okay, tell me about that, what you remember.
Well, they were pretty upset. Any parent would be. I
Okay.
cannot imagine
Sure.
losing
Okay.
my child.
Okay. And so the parents were upset. And
Mhm.
anything else you can recall about that? Okay. Did you think that was inappropriate that the parents were upset? Did that sway you one way or the other?
No.
Okay.
Any parent would feel that way. If you lose your child, well, I cannot imagine.
Okay. And do you understand under the law that you can only make your decision on what happens in the courtroom? Can you
Yes.
agree with that?
Yes,
So
sir.
you can disregard that in terms of the parents that have lost one? In other words, that you just have to focus on what actually happens in the courtroom? The
Yes.
evidence? Can you agree to abide by that?
Yes.
Okay. As you were hearing stuff, did you formulate opinions one way or the other, or were you trying, or tell me what you were doing when you were hearing stuff?
Just listening to what was going on.
So-
Like any news, I mean, you listen and see
Sure.
what's going on.
So you on purpose, or that's just your nature, you were keeping an open mind?
I enjoy the news. I enjoy seeing what's going on in the community,
Sure.
around the world, and you can ask my coworkers. I enjoy listening halfway
Right.
to the
And
news.
you would agree that the media, as you stated already, I believe, doesn't always get it right, in terms
Oh,
of the
they
facts?
don't.
They don't, okay, I didn't want to. And then the other thing is that sometimes the media doesn't just tell you the story, but sometimes there's commentary about that too. In other words, sometimes people are referred to as talking heads or experts or other people commenting about what that means and what that doesn't mean.
And what sells?
Pardon me?
And what sells?
And what sells. Do you remember any commentary by people on the news about the case in terms of what this means, whether this means this or this means that?
No.
Okay. I gather in your response to the question, I apologize, you mentioned something about Mr. Martin's parents saying something on the news or something about that. And you agree that you cannot consider that at all in your decision. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Want to make sure. And any other aspect of what you've told us right now, you agree that you have to leave that outside the courtroom, what you've
Yes.
seen in the media. You also mentioned that in answering one of the questions that we realize people take time from their everyday lives and jobs, there's stuff going on with family and friends and at work too, and we realize it's a sacrifice to come and serve as a juror. We realize that people make a sacrifice. But that's the only way our system works. You know, we ask people to come from their everyday lives. My point in asking you that is, as established in the context of what I'm going to ask you next, you answered the question that this would not be an insurmountable hardship. Is that correct?
No, my children are all grown.
Okay, all right. And my point is, we have now decided, or we estimate as best we can on both sides, that we think the jury trial itself, once we pick the trial, will probably be anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And the court has also made a determination, because the court wants to ensure that the verdict is from the jury as opposed to influences from the media or other aspects of it, in terms of the media influence you, that you will be sequestered. Do you understand that?
Yes.
As part of the process. And we realize most people do not get overly excited about that, but that's part of what we all have to do. You agree, and you can do that. Is that correct? Well,
Yes,
I'm not trying to get you to say one
I
thing or
can
the
do
other.
it. Do I
Okay.
want, would I prefer to be sequestered? No, but
I
yes,
think
I
that's the
can.
answer that everybody would give. You're human, but you understand that. And my point is, it's not an insurmountable hardship. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. You mentioned that something about that at some point when you were telling me about what you had heard, that thought he was suspicious. I think you said, right, that Mr. Zimmerman thought somebody was suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
And is that based on what the media said? Or is
Yes.
that- okay. And something about the defense of his life, that's also from the media, or is that your
Mhm.
own statement
Yes.
about that? Is that from the media?
Yes.
Okay. My question is, sometimes when we speak, we've heard something in the media, and then we kind of interject our kind of thoughts or opinions as we mention about that. Everything you've told us in terms of from the media, is that basically from the media as opposed to you?
Yes.
You have not interjected your opinion in your answers to my questions?
No.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Mara?
Yes, good afternoon. Afternoon, ma'am. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. My name's Mark O'Mara. I represent George Zimmerman. And in the middle, Don West is my co-counsel, Robert Herschel, and helping out. Do you have a feel for why you're here and what we're doing at this part of the stage of the proceedings?
Yes, you want to make sure that Mr. Zimmerman has a fair trial.
Perfect. And that whatever you know about the case, we sort of find out a little bit about it so that we can drill into it, make sure that to the extent that you have those opinions, that we can agree to set them aside. So it may take a few minutes to do just that. One question, and then I could sit down, is can you leave everything outside the courtroom and only listen to what comes from the witness stand? And
Yes.
presumably you would say yes, and I could sit down, but I'm not going to, at least for a few more minutes. Because I want to look into it a little bit more if I can.
Sure.
And just make sure that we've found out what you know. And I've heard that obviously you're quite interested in the news. It's sort of a almost hobby, if not just a true interest of yours, to keep up on current events.
Mm-hmm.
And that you've not actively kept up on this, but as it's shown itself in the media, you've watched it. Is that accurate?
I have, but it got tiring after a while
Mm-hmm.
when one day they say one thing and then they say another, and
Okay. And that I think you said that it began sort of with a surge early on in the matter when the case first happened. Is
Mhm.
that correct?
yes.
And when you do answer me, as you did Mr. Deleonder, I can understand what you're saying, but if you can, I might remind you along the way for yes or no's, because that's what the court reporter has to take down. Okay?
Certainly. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. One of the things that you mentioned I want to ask about as an example of a concern, just a systemic concern that we have. You mentioned that you had heard, I think you said a young man was shot and killed in a subdivision by somebody who was patrolling the subdivision. Was that-
Yes.
Okay. And that's sort of just something, a little factoid that you heard about at some point in the past?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
If, however, you came to the court, you were on the jury, you listened to all the evidence, you heard it under oath from the witness stand, and there was no evidence that suggested that Mrs. Zimmerman was patrolling the neighborhood, what would you rely on? Your memory that you thought you heard from the media, or the presentation here in the courtroom?
I would say the presentation here in the courtroom.
Any concern with, to the extent that your memory conflicts with what you hear in the courtroom, any concern with setting aside those factoids or that memory that you had from outside the courtroom?
The thing we have to remember, and that I like to think that I will remember, is that what the media reports is what they first hear, what comes to them right away. Sometimes, you know, they don't take the time to research and look into it and really report the facts. You know, it sells. And unfortunately, sometimes the media does a great disservice to the people by just reporting whatever.
Have you evidenced in your knowledge and view of the news that sometimes the media rushes to judgment or simply presents it in a way that might look sensational, sell news, but sacrifices accuracy?
Yes.
Is that a concern or a filter that you have that you look at the media through generally?
I just think it's sad because I think it does a disservice to people who are fighting for their lives. You know, a lot of times the public gets a bad impression or gets the wrong information. And then sometimes the media apologizes for their errors, but the damage is done.
Mm-hmm. How has that shown itself to you in this case?
Well, in the beginning, they came out with that the young man, my impression was that he was the innocent person. And now they're reporting other things, some of the things that he did in school, that he wasn't the innocent young man that they initially portrayed. He's a teenager. He's a 17-year-old kid. I mean, no child is perfect. But seems like they're pulling from both ends.
And you think that the media has, I don't want to put words in your mouth, somewhat of their own agenda in bringing it out in different ways?
Yeah, so it sells. They can lengthen the story.
That was one example. Can you give me others of how that's shown itself in this case to you? The early sort of suggesting.
Well, it was like when they initially reported that Mr. Zimmerman had no injuries, and then a week or so later, he did. So what do you believe? I mean, you listen to the story, but that's just it. You listen to the story, but I personally have seen too many stories where the beginning and the end are so different.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I just want to make sure, as I said when I began, that whatever you may have heard in the media, as one-sided or incomplete as it may have been, that you're not going to default to that in assisting you to make a decision here on this case.
No, sir, I'm not.
So that if you don't hear it from the witness stand, will you agree not to consider it?
Yes, sir.
You had mentioned that on occasion you get to view the case, or at least you get to view the news. And sometimes that might include snippets about the case while you're at your job.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of those. We just have to say yes or no.
Yeah,
so
I'm
she
so
gets it.
sorry, yes.
That's okay. That's all right. In the same sense, you listen to the radio sometimes at work?
No.
Okay. How about in the car ride back and forth to work?
Sometimes.
All right. And would that also be a similar sort of whatever the media brings to you through the radio, you'll listen to, but will also filter through what we've just talked about?
Just listening,
Okay.
really.
All right.
Something to occupy your mind.
Okay. And do you listen to the news or watch the news in the morning before work?
No,
No?
don't have time.
Okay. And how about the afternoon, after work, or when you're home at night?
After work, sometimes,
All
in
right.
between cooking dinner,
All right. So maybe some background noise in that sense as well.
a lot of times, yes.
And one of your default or go-to stations is Fox,
One of them, yeah. Mhm.
and some others?
Oh, yeah, ABC, NBC, CNN.
We've talked about the media in general and some of their biases or the way they focus it. Have you seen individual stations or networks have a bias to them individually, like Fox versus MSNBC or CNN or anything?
No.
Okay. If I truly asked you to put a number on it, and I'm not going to ask about individuals past this question, but if I had to ask how many times you had an input into you, be it from friends or family, the media itself, that had something to do with the George Zimmerman case, and you had to give me an estimate, what would it be?
In great length, none.
Okay.
In passing, 2 or 3 maybe?
And a similar question to what Mr. De Leon asked you, but if I asked you for the 3 most significant parts of this case, so just those things that stick out in your mind about the case today, not just when it first came out, but now that you've sort of had the exposure to the media in the past 14, 15 months, if I asked you today the top 3 most significant issues about this case, what would they be?
A young man lost his life, another man is fighting for his life, and no one is a winner in this case.
Are you aware, based upon the media exposure, of some of the social or political or cultural pressures that have been placed upon this case?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
That Trayvon Martin is African American. I believe Mr. Zimmerman is Puerto Rican.
I'm not supposed to give facts
I'm
right
not
now, so
sure.
whatever it is that
I'm
you
not positive.
perceive. Okay.
So that in itself is a conflict,
Okay.
or it can be.
All right. To the extent that you believe that those pressures exist, do you think that they would affect your ability to decide this case on the facts and the evidence as opposed to those pressures which, of course, are outside the courtroom and not inside the courtroom?
No.
Would it affect your ability to come back with a verdict, regardless of what it is and regardless of the impact it might have on those factions who have political or cultural beliefs in this regard?
No.
I might just have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you for your time. Ma'am.
If you'll remain seated for just one moment, counsel, please approach when you're ready. Okay, we're going to take a 15-minute recess, so court will be in recess. record. Are we ready to bring in our next juror? Potential juror.
Your Honor, I-33 is present.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. You can have a seat, thank you. You will continue to be known as juror I-33, and the attorneys will have an opportunity. Can you see me now?
Yes, I can.
The attorneys will have an opportunity to ask you questions about your juror questionnaire you filled out last Tuesday, and we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda. You may proceed.
Please report. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
As Judge Nelson explained to you, this part of the process, we're still trying to pick a jury, and this particular part of it is we're asking you questions about what you've seen in the media in terms of what you filled out in the questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to develop that a little bit, ask you some questions to kind of get your memory going in terms of what you remember. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I read your questionnaire, and the other thing I wanted to make sure you understand is we've got your address and all that, so don't, and we're referring to you as Judge Nelson indicated as I-33 or sir. You mentioned that your brief knowledge and source of this from the local news, and that you have heard that Martin was killed in an altercation with Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. The local news, I gather, was that TV versus newspaper, or both?
A little of both.
Okay. And is there a particular channel or station that you listen to in terms of the TV?
No, sir, not really.
Just whatever's on that day?
That's right.
Okay. And then the newspaper, would that have been the Orlando Sentinel?
It would be.
Okay. And was that an old-fashioned hard copy, or was that online?
That would be the old-fashioned hard
Getting
copy.
it out, going out to the street, or almost the street, I guess, and getting it out of your driveway?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you recall, in terms of your exposure to this case by way of the media, was that at the very beginning? This happened back in February of last year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you kept up with the case as it has progressed from back in February to right now?
Not really.
Okay. If you can, describe to me in terms of, you became aware of the case at some point last year. And
Yes.
did you kind of lose interest in the case, or what was your progression of knowledge of the case or lack thereof?
I believe that I didn't really get bored with it at all, but I did feel compassion for both entities, and the more I heard, the less I wanted to hear.
And when you say compassion for both entities, you're talking about Mr. Zimmerman and also Trayvon
Certainly.
Martin, is that correct?
Certainly.
Okay. In terms of your knowledge of the case itself, in terms of facts, do you remember anything about what this involves other than what you've noted here? You stated he was killed in an altercation with Mr. Zimmerman. You remember where it occurred?
A condominium complex in Stanford.
Right. And if you don't know, it's perfectly all right to say you know. I'm just trying to get an idea of what you remember. You know, we're all exposed to a lot of stuff, and sometimes we remember certain things, sometimes we don't remember.
Yes.
Do you remember any more about the circumstances leading up to the death of Mr. Martin?
Not really, other than I know it happened at night.
Okay.
It's really about how they got in a
Okay.
fight.
A fight, okay. Do you remember what the fight was about? If it was a fight, as you make reference to it?
I have no
Okay.
idea.
Okay. Did you ever, by way of exposure to the news, recall any kind of photographs related to the case?
Oh, I've seen photographs,
Okay.
yes.
Tell me as best you can recall what the photographs were of.
I've seen a photograph of Mr. Martin and photograph of Mr. Zimmerman.
Okay. Do you recall the photographs of Mr. Martin, what he appeared to be like? Was it standing? Was it sitting? What kind of clothing he was wearing or anything?
Yes, I remember that the picture that I saw was of Mr. Martin in the most publicized way in a hooded sweatshirt, standing, I believe.
Okay. Any other photographs of Mr. Martin other than that one?
Not really.
And I'm not saying that there was, I'm just saying what you remember. How about Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes, I've seen pictures of Mr. Zimmerman as
What
well.
do you recall of the pictures of Mr. Zimmerman being like?
I remember seeing just his face, and then I remember one time seeing him getting out of the police car at whatever police station he was at.
Okay. Anything else?
Not that I really remember, other than I did see a picture of him recently, as compared to when it all began.
Okay, and the recent picture, what did that, just a regular picture, or what did
Just
that
a
look
regular
like?
picture,
Okay,
probably a couple months ago.
okay. Do you recall the setting that it was, the picture of Mr. Zimmerman that you saw recently? Not where you were, but the setting, if there was one regarding Mr. Zimmerman.
Not exactly, no, sir.
The fact that you saw Mr. Martin in a hooded sweatshirt, did that cause you to form an opinion regarding one way or the other? Or-
No, sir.
Okay. And the photographs that you depicted, or you described, I'm sorry, regarding Mr. Zimmerman, did that force, or did you form impressions one way or the other regarding that?
No, sir.
Okay. Any other photographs related to the case that you can recall?
I don't believe so.
Okay. By my question, I don't mean to imply that there was or there wasn't. I'm just not allowed to feed you information and say, this doesn't apply, so I'm giving you a hypothetical. I'm not allowed to tell you, oh, there was a blue car there. You mean you didn't see it? And then ask you about it. Does that make sense?
I understand.
I'm trying to get from you what you know, and I'm trying to prod as best as I can. Do you recall any type of recordings, if there were any, related to this case?
I remember there's a 911 tape, but I don't believe I ever heard it.
Did you just hear commentary about it, or a mention that there was a 911 tape?
Mentioned that there was one.
Okay. Anything significant that you recall being said about that tape by any commentator or reporter?
Maybe you could ask that a different way.
Okay. Anything you recall about the gist or the subject matter in the 911 tape? Who was talking or what it involved?
I do remember that there was some screaming on it.
Okay. And did you say you had not yourself listened to the tape?
No.
Okay. And your source
Yes, I
of...
did say that. No, I haven't.
Okay, thank you. And your source of information or that there was screaming, is it just somebody commented that there was screaming on the tape?
Yes.
Okay. And the commentary or news report of somebody screaming on the tape, either that you read or saw on the news, did it elaborate any more if there was any significance to that? In other words, did it just say, there's a 911 tape, they're screaming, or did it just leave off at screaming? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask you?
Try it again.
Okay. It's hard to ask people when you're making sure that you're not giving them the answer. Do you understand?
Yes, sir, I understand.
Okay. My question is, you mentioned that you heard or read something about a 911 tape and it involved screaming. Did the article or the broadcast that you saw or read, did it say the screaming was by, did it tell you who it was and the significance of the screaming? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did hear at one time the actual screaming, and there was some controversy as to who was doing the screaming.
Okay. Did you come to any conclusions one way or the other as to who was doing the screaming?
No, sir.
Whether it was one person, two people, or whoever it was?
No, sir.
So you have not, I know your ultimate opinion is that you have not formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant, correct?
That is correct.
My question is, did you form any impressions or opinions regarding the significance of the recording at all, or who did it, or the screaming at all?
I haven't formed an opinion about that.
You have?
I have not.
Oh, you have not, okay, thank you. Anything else you recall, any other recording, if there was, of any type related to this case?
Not
Okay.
that I remember.
Okay. How about any of the court proceedings? Do you recall any reporting about what was happening in court? Like rulings by the court, motions being filed, just regular court proceedings? Anything about that?
Court proceedings like right now?
Yeah,
Or
no,
from the very beginning?
from the very beginning. in
Oh,
terms of-
probably so. I don't
Okay.
remember any details.
Okay. You got the jury summons.
Yes, I did.
And that was probably 3, 4, 5 weeks ago? About?
Something like
Okay.
that, yes,
And
sir.
at some point when you came down here the first time, the judge ordered you not to talk about the case or not to read anything about it. Prior to coming down to court, and when you got the jury summons, so when you got that, did you kind of do any research to see what cases were out there? And maybe I would have more knowledge. Sometimes people, when they get that summons, they think they've got to become more knowledgeable about the case. Did you do any of that stuff?
No, sir, I will tell you that I did hear if you get a January 10th summons that it might be about this case.
Okay, sure.
But I...
June 10th, you meant, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Other than that... no.
okay. Have you discussed this case with friends or family?
Since the very beginning?
Yeah, since the very beginning.
Probably, yes.
Okay. Do you recall at this time what the discussions were about?
Just that it happened.
Okay. Any commentary about what was going on with the case other than somebody was shot?
Not really, other than, things that took place in the city of Sanford
Sure.
regarding this and that.
Right. What do you recall in terms of things that took place? What do you recall discussing about that or commentary about that with friends or family?
Mostly it was just commentary from the media regarding, the tragedy itself and the events that took place with the police department and things like that.
Did you feel that was slanted one way or the other, either in favor of Mr. Zimmerman or in favor of Trayvon Martin or anything?
No, I really don't
Okay.
have an opinion on that.
And did the people you were talking to regarding that, did they express an opinion about that?
Not that I remember.
Okay. In addition to the news, in terms of straight news, like car was going down the street, then there's people commenting about the news, either in the newspaper or on TV. Would you agree with that? Have you heard commentary about the case is what I'm saying?
Oh, I heard some.
Oh, yeah, okay. And do you recall who you would have heard it from?
You hear it everywhere.
Okay, all right.
Walking down the street.
Sure, okay. Did that sway you one way or the other?
No, sir.
Okay. The commentary that you would have been exposed to just from walking down the street or other, was that one-sided or was that from both sides? People either in favor of Mr. Zimmerman being prosecuted or people in favor of Mr. Zimmerman not being prosecuted or charged, et cetera?
I would say both ways.
Okay. And I gather in passing, did you ever express an opinion one way or the other about that? About, he should be prosecuted or he shouldn't, that
No,
kind
I
of stuff.
never-
Just even in passing, even though your ultimate decision is that you have not formed an opinion.
I don't think so.
Okay. How about with family? Any discussions with them in terms of what should happen regarding the death of Trayvon Martin?
Not on that exact thing, no, sir.
Okay. Anything related to anything about the case or the reaction in terms of the community, if there was reaction about this case?
Yes, I've discussed the reaction. Or
Okay, tell me a little bit.
listen to people
Sure.
discuss about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you live in this community, so you've been exposed to it. My question is, do you recall what opinions you expressed or what impressions you had as a result of these discussions.
I don't think I ever expressed an exact opinion either way about that end of it. I don't remember any
Okay.
opinion.
Yes, sir. How did you feel about it in terms of community's reaction to this case?
The community reaction, I think, went kind of both ways.
Okay.
I feel like there was a lot of overreaction, possibly, but I'm not in, the direct seat there.
Sure.
But there was some, I'll just call it heavy talk in both directions.
Do you believe in the one of our basic rights in terms of free speech by anybody?
Certainly.
Okay. Did you think that the overreaction, if there was, by one side or the other, or both, did you feel that was contrary to their rights to free speech? In other words, did you think it was improper in any way?
I think free speech is pretty broad, and the rules are the rules, so to speak. That free speech is free speech. So I don't. Whatever happened is just what happened. I don't think that anybody should be held back by what they say.
Sure. And that, I gather, would not influence you one way or the other in terms of taking sides in this case?
No.
Or did it? It did
No.
not, I'm assuming. Okay. I apologize if I already asked you this, but do you do any Facebook or any other social media type stuff?
No, I'm challenged in that respect.
I can relate to that. But how about other family or friends that may do that? Have they exposed you in any way in terms of telling you, like, oh, there's been commentary on Facebook about one side or the other?
No, I have a very small family, and none of us do that.
Okay. How about at work, any discussions about the case at all? Okay. Other than
Unfortunately, I'm currently not working.
Okay, sorry to hear that. The question that was in the questionnaire too talked about how long the trial would take and possibly being sequestered or not. Let me kind of broach that subject with you. That was question number 5 in the questionnaire, the second page of the questionnaire. And I think you stated that you did not have an insurmountable hardship, so I want to explore that a little bit with you. We realize that as citizens of this great country, we all give up certain rights, and what I mean by that is in terms of serving as jurors, it's a hardship. It's not something that most people willingly volunteer to do, but we ask people to come and take time from their lives, and we realize it disrupts their lives at home and at work.
Yes, sir.
And that's the way our system works. We don't just pick jurors that are jurors there all the time. We ask people to their lives be disrupted, in other words. We don't have professional jurors. And taking that into account, we have estimated both sides that this trial will take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. So we realize it's a disruption for everybody, including especially the jurors. The court has also made a determination, Judge Nelson has made a determination because she wants to make sure that the verdict is based on what happens in the courtroom as opposed to the media being influencing jurors in one way or the other, that the jury will be sequestered. So your contact with family, et cetera, will be severely limited. The perimeters hasn't officially been set, but I can tell you you'll be sequestered.
Excuse me.
So in other words, you understand that that's what's going to occur, and I understand that you don't have an insurmountable hardship regarding that. Is that correct? I know it's an inconvenience, but is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure. You have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
notes that are of no use whatsoever. At this point, I'll stand up. My name is Don West, one of the attorneys on behalf of Mr. Zimmerman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for your patience in these proceedings. I know you've been here more than just today as well. This is Mark O'Mara and Robert Hirschhorn, Mr. O'Mara's co-counsel on the case. Mr. Hirschhorn's helping us at this point, and of course, George Zimmerman at the end. This phase of the jury selection is limited to the issue of publicity, knowledge from the media, basically the information that you bring into the courtroom with you in advance of hearing any evidence. Then there's another phase where more general questions might be asked, more personal information might be asked and such. And by personal, I mean just how you feel about certain issues, not personal information that would be released to the public that would be of any concern. So with that in mind, we're fairly limited today. So I just have a couple of areas to touch on, and I don't want to just ask the same questions over because I've tried to pay attention and make some notes. So just interested in how you feel and what you know. There's no right or wrong answers today. So the local news that you might watch from time to time, is that the big three stations, ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox? I guess there's 4.
That would be correct.
And you get them through the local affiliates here?
Yes, sir.
Do you have?
I think so. Let me be honest and tell you that I'm not in control of the changer.
You know, we've heard that before.
I think I watch Fox News, but it may not be the local Fox affiliate.
Sure.
I'm not
Okay. So to the extent that you may have had some contact in the news with this case, it's likely through one of the local stations?
Yes, sir.
Do you know if at your home, if you have cable that includes Channel 13? That's the Bright House system. A lot of people
I don't have
it.
cable. I got DirecTV. I do not know if it gets that channel or not.
I suspect not. I think that's the default station if you have cable, but you don't.
No, we don't.
And you
have
haven't
cable.
had that in the last year and a half?
No, sir.
As far as other news sources, do you sometimes watch some of the cable news networks, CNN, for example?
No.
Is your news then, from television anyway, pretty much limited by the local television stations?
Pretty much so, yes, sir.
Okay. I think you did mention that you are a subscriber to the Orlando Sentinel.
Yes, I am.
Is that part of your routine?
Most days, yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. A couple of comments. Well, actually, let me just look through here. I take it, though, that you're not active in any social media. What I mean, like Facebook.
Oh, no.
You don't communicate with family or friends or anybody in that medium.
No, I just learned how to email, though.
Mhm.
That's as far as I've gotten.
Welcome to the 21st century.
I know, it's enlightening, trust me.
Have you been following the case closely enough to know about any decisions that the court has already made in the case or any decisions that are pending?
Not that I can think of.
Correct. Have you ever met any of the attorneys connected with the case or been present somewhere where they may have spoken?
No, sir.
Do you remember any press conferences given by anyone connected with the case?
have seen where people are getting interviewed on TV. Best I can remember is I was doing something else and might have caught a word or two, but that would be it.
Was there
Substance, I don't know.
anything said by anyone connected with the case, any attorney or family member or potential witness? Because, you know, some of the potential witnesses have been on TV. Anything that has caught your attention that sticks with you about the case?
Other than that, I've seen them. You know, I have to tell you, I don't remember what all was said, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect you to remember exactly what was said. I'm really looking just for, is there anything that was said that really resonated with you, really stuck with you that...
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Do you remember ever talking about the case at church or any other social organization, club, anything you might
No,
belong to? I know you mentioned at this point that you're not currently employed.
That's correct.
How long has that been?
It's been quite a while. I got injured in a car wreck, and I'm a hands-on contractor and project manager, and I haven't really been able to do anything
So
along those lines.
Part of it is the physical recovery aspect of it?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that you've heard at least part of a recording that contains some screams in the background.
Yes, sir.
And you made the comment that you've heard a little about the controversy surrounding that.
Yes, sir.
What do you mean by controversy?
I mean that I think they were wondering who was actually doing the screaming.
Mm-hmm. Are you aware of anything connected with that? Any efforts to figure out who was doing the screaming?
I really don't know. I think they were trying to figure out who was doing the screaming. That's about all I know.
Just the idea that there's been an interest in figuring out who was doing the screaming, if possible.
I think that's what it might be.
Mm-hmm. I take it that you have not formed any opinion yourself that you know who was screaming.
No, sir, I don't have a clue.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I said I'd be jumping around a little bit so we don't take too long. It's been a long day already and such. You had mentioned about a community reaction to the case early on,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're familiar with that. And your recollection is that there was some, you called it, I think, heavy talking on both sides. Is that your impression of it?
Yeah, I know there was some, some problems that caused the police chief to vacate his job. And that's pretty much all I really know about it.
Has that caused you to form any opinion about whether the police did a good job or not in this case?
I don't think I'm formed an opinion. I don't really know what happened as far as why he lost his job exactly.
Let me check. It's just a moment. Bear with us. Almost done. Thank you. Just question or two about what any conversations you may have had with others, like neighbors or former coworkers, about the case. I know most people have an opinion of some sort on the stuff they read in the newspaper, hear on the news. Has anybody been expressing their opinions to you, how they feel about the case?
Oh, yeah, I've heard a few, yes, sir.
Is that neighbors or friends?
Let's just say acquaintances. I live in the middle of nowhere, so I really don't have any neighbors, but I see people from time to time, and I've heard comments and opinions from going down both sides of the fence.
In other words, both sides, meaning some that may have offered an opinion in support of the prosecution or in support of the idea of self-defense.
Yes, sir.
As a result of that, have you formed any fixed opinions yourselves? Or are you able to, if you're on the jury, would you be able to decide the case based just on what you hear in the courtroom?
Yes, I don't think that I've listened to it enough or really had enough facts to form an opinion, probably.
To some extent, does it go in one ear and out the other when you're hearing this kind of stuff out there among your...
It sort of does. Since we got over here and been told not to discuss it, I've had to tell people that please, don't say any more. If I'm home and the TV's on, everybody knows to turn the channel if something comes up, that kind of thing. So it's tough not to hear something, but I have not formed an opinion on what anybody said or what I've read.
You consider yourself to have an open mind, and that anything that you might have heard outside the courtroom that could differ from something you hear in the courtroom, that you would only rely in your decision on what you've heard in the courtroom.
Yes, I can do that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you'll remain seated for just a moment, and counsel approach when you're ready.
I-44 was present.
Please be seated. Good afternoon, sir. You're going to continue to be called Juror I-44, and the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire that you filled out last Tuesday. And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Rionda. You may.
Please report. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
We're going to be asking you questions just limited to your exposure to the media, what you remember, and that kind of stuff. Let me start off with one of the questions you asked. That was asked of you in the questionnaire. You stated you had not formed an opinion as to the defendant's guilt or innocence. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And that would still be accurate today?
Yes.
Okay. Because I know when you filled this out, you've had time to think about it some more, and that would still be true.
Yes.
Okay. I want to go over what you remember reading or watching on TV about the case. And let me start off with your exposure to whatever media there was about the case. Was that national or local or both?
Typically, I get my my media sources from the internet.
Okay.
I just don't find much credibility in what I see on the TV with regards to this.
On the internet, are there particular sites you go to get your source of information?
Yeah, there's a few.
And do you recall what they are?
Sure, CNN,
Okay.
MSNBC.
Okay. Now, in addition to just reporting straight news, do they also sometimes give opinions about one way or the other about things?
They do, however, I don't take much value in that.
Okay. So I start off, I guess the question I would ask is, you would agree that the media, do you believe the media has a slant one way or the other?
Of course, yes.
Okay, all right. So you can separate all that stuff and just make your decision on what actually happens in the courtroom?
That's exactly it, yes.
Would that be true?
Yes.
Okay. In other words, whatever exposure you've had from the media, you agree that under the law that has to be kept outside the courtroom and you cannot let it in any way weigh in your decision?
That is correct. As I said, I don't find credibility unless it's from the courtroom.
So in other words, if you were to recall something, if you're sitting as a juror and you recalled something and it was different than what the witness said, you would have to rely on what the witness said as opposed to what you recall on TV or from the internet?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any issue about being able to do that?
No.
Okay. Did you have any discussions with any family or friends about this case?
After telling them it was my 6th day on the jury, a lot of them tried, but
No, and I apologize. That wasn't a trick question. We know you're abiding by the court's instructions, but I appreciate you saying that.
Mm-hmm.
I meant, and I wasn't clear in what I asked. My question is, prior to finding out you were going to be on the jury, going back to last year, have you had discussions, or did you have discussions with family or friends about the case?
some.
Okay.
Limited.
And did you express an opinion about the case to any family members or friends?
The only opinion that I expressed was that, gosh, how long is the media going to, avalanche us with this, and for how long,
Okay. So in terms you felt it was an overexposure by the media, I guess?
Once again, yes.
Okay, all right. How about with people at work? Any discussions about the case with people at work? And I'm talking pre you finding out you were a juror.
Yes. I'm a manager for my store.
And we know where it is, so you don't have to tell us where it is.
Yes. Thank you. And that's my policy is if it's not work related, it doesn't belong in the workplace. So that I follow that as well.
Okay. So let's talk about what you recall about the case. What do you remember about the case? And I know you've notated some things here already that we've had an opportunity to read. Other than what you've notated here, you mentioned that you had heard of George Zimmerman, you've heard of Trayvon Martin, and you mentioned he is a man on trial for a murder charge. He made calls from jail that have been scrutinized in local media for their hidden and coded nature.
That is correct.
All right. Anything else you can recall other than what you've noted here?
The only things I can recall is a story sensationalized about the Skittle Company,
Okay.
Which I found very irrelevant and I ignored.
Tell me about that, the Skittle Company.
I guess he had Skittles in his hands that night, and I guess.
Who?
The Trayvon
Okay,
Martin.
okay.
He had Skittles, and I guess then the Skittles company wanted to somehow capitalize on that.
Oh, okay.
That's
All
as
right.
far as the extent
You
is.
didn't think that was a good thing?
I thought this is shameless, and
Okay.
once again, it's
Sure.
just consumerism.
Sure. Anything else you can recall about the facts about what happened, how Mr. Martin ended up dead?
I mean, I know he was wearing a hoodie,
Okay.
and I know it was raining that night. but
Sure.
That's,
Anything else you can recall in terms of leading up to, as you described, he's a man on trial for a murder charge regarding Mr. Zimmerman being charged with murder? Anything you recall related to that?
the only thing I can recall is that, if I'm not mistaken, he turned himself in, he went down for questioning, and at a later time, that's when,
Okay.
they took him in.
Any significance that you paid to any of that you've told us so far?
None.
All right. If you recall something, as you've notated already, or if you're sitting as a jury, you recall something, and it's different than what comes out of that witness stand, would you rely on what comes out of the witness stand or what you recall?
Witness stand.
Okay. How about if you recall something, but it never comes out in the trial? In other words, you never hear it. Can you agree to completely disregard what you recall?
I would find it irrelevant, yes,
Okay.
I'd disregard it.
Now, do you recall seeing any photographs related to this case?
No.
Okay. How about if there were any recordings of any type related to this case?
As I said, the only recording I was aware of was the one that was played on the radio, as a matter
Okay.
of fact. And
Well, do you remember what that recording was of?
they slowed it down. They put some audio music to it to make it comical.
Okay.
You know.
Oh, okay.
And so, I mean, there was a lot of laughter on there. All I know is how much fun they seemed to get out of making fun of it. I didn't really pay much mind to the
You
content.
didn't find that was appropriate, or? Okay.
I just listen to them to make me laugh, and I don't find any other credibility other than that in them.
Do you remember any other recording of any type or any commentary? Let me before I ask you a compound question. Any other recordings of any time you remember?
I recall hearing snippets of a 911 call.
Okay. Any significance to that at all? Do you remember what the 911 call was about?
I recall some banter between Mr. Zimmerman and the 911 operator. But
Do you
again,
remember
I
anything
don't.
of what was said between either the 911 operator and Mr. Zimmerman?
I believe I recall the operator, saying, "We're on our way. We're on our way."
Okay.
No.
Anything other than that?
Other than that,
Okay. And you mentioned in your notation here on the form, the questionnaire, that he made calls from jail that have been scrutinized. Did you actually listen to calls, or was that just, and I'm not saying that, or did you actually hear that or report that there was calls made?
that was only pertaining to the audio played on the radio with.
Okay.
Which they distorted the sound and played music and,
Oh, okay.
and did it in jest. I never paid attention to it in its original or clear form, I guess, if that helps.
Any other aspect of the case that you recall, either the case itself or anything that happened in terms of news conferences or other type of things associated with the case?
I live in Lake Mary, so I was aware of the traffic jams, I guess, when there were some protests taking place, but I didn't attend the protests. I didn't pay much mind to them.
And did you feel that that was improper in terms of your label or description of protest, or did you think that was improper or proper, or you just didn't?
As Americans, we have the right to,
Free
peaceful
speech.
protest, so, but
You didn't place any significance one way or the other?
other than it drastically elongated my time to get home to see my family after
Sure.
work, no.
Would that interfere with you being able to sit as a juror if you felt those protests or free speech was directed one way or the other?
Not at all.
Would you hold that against one side or the other?
No.
Okay. Anything else that you can recall about the case that stood out in your mind?
No, I'm afraid not.
Sure, that's all right. If assuming you weren't on a jury, and assuming a close friend of yours came from out of town, let's assume they were in a country where they had no knowledge of this case.
Sure.
And they came in, and you were allowed to talk about it because you weren't on the jury, and they told you, what's going on in Sanford, you know, in June, and what's going on here? What is this case about? What would you tell them?
Well, other than, hey, let's wait and find out, you know, I'd basically fill them in on, you know, I mean, there was a shooting, and essentially there's going to be a hearing, and they're going to find out, you know, what happened.
And if that friend was really curious and said, shooting, what was the shooting about? What would you tell them?
I'd say let me direct you to any one of the numerous media sources. Feel free to take your pick. It's a needle in a haystack.
Sure, okay. As best you can recall from the exposure you had, did you form an opinion, not the ultimate opinion in terms, I know you stated you have not formed an opinion as to guilt or innocence. Did you, based on the media, did they express any facts more about other than it was a shooting? What it was related to or anything like that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
Sure, and I apologize. I was trying to ask you a question without feeding you the answer.
Sure.
So we're not allowed to give you information and say,
Understood.
oh, by the way, you didn't hear about this. Do you remember any more detail in this media recounts or about the shooting other than it was a shooting? Do you remember anything about more what led up to the shooting or circumstances related to the shooting?
Other than what I mentioned about it being a
Okay.
rainy night, hoodie,
Okay.
you know, I don't recall anything else on that.
Sure. And I gather, you know, as you realize by this time that we ask people to serve as jurors, we ask them to take time from their lives and jobs, et cetera. We know it's an inconvenience.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that a lot of people, in terms of having to take time, it's a hardship, but not an insurmountable hardship. My question is, the judges, we are estimating as best we can that the jury process, once we pick a jury, the trial itself may last anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And we also, the court has made a decision, because we don't want the jury to be exposed in terms of contact from the media, that the jury will be sequestered. So
Okay.
your contact with outsiders, family, et cetera, will be severely limited.
Okay.
Do you understand that? And I gather by your answer that even though that may be something that would not be ideal, it would not be an insurmountable hardship. Is that correct?
That is correct. It would not be ideal, but far from insurmountable.
Okay. If I may have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Mara.
Afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. My name is Mark O'Mara. I represent George Zimmerman, who's sitting in the middle. Don West on the far side is my co-counsel. Robert Hirschhorn is helping out on this stage. And has it sort of become apparent to you what we're doing right now, which is just to find out what we call pretrial publicity, basically just what information you know about the case as you come into the courtroom. So any of my questions are going to sort of be focused on that, as will Mr. DeLeon's, okay?
Understood.
And it sounds as though you come to us with a healthy skepticism about media. Would that be accurate?
Yes, if I may explain. I'm
Sure.
a father of 3, and in my opinion, the news is all negative. And we're a blended family, and so anything that I can do to keep the negativity out of the house, I'm up for. And I just feel that constant exposure to this negativity that the media feeds, you know, through the television and radio and what have you, it's just not a way to build a family, and I choose not to allow it in the home.
Okay. Are the children of age where you can talk to them about the exposure they may have and the same concerns with the media?
Certainly, the 10, 12, my youngest is under 1 year age, so not yet.
And to the extent that you've heard about this case, I think you've explained it in response to some questions, which is some along the way, initially a bit more in the beginning when it sort of hit, or?
Could you repeat that again? Sorry.
Sure. Did you hear, I thought, and I might be wrong, that you had said that you had heard about this case when it first happened, and you heard about it more back then and sort of got over it or past it after the initial, I think you said, avalanche.
Correct. That's absolutely correct, yes.
Okay. Back then, if you could just give me a little bit more insight as to when it first came across to you. Say, what was the first thing that you heard about this case when you first heard about it?
I'll do my best. I believe I was watching, gosh, this just one of the TV shows that we like, that we frequent, and then we saw, you know, breaking news, you know, from one of the local sources. Well, when I saw that, I said, well, let's see what else is on, and it appeared as though it was on every channel. So we took a moment, you know, took in what we could, and says, all right, well, looks like there's going to be another drawn-out case the local media is going to absolutely hit us with, so I'm just going to put on something different. Other than that, as I said, I do check CNN, and you know, the only thing that I can recall is they, you know, they put up a computer-generated, you know, what might have happened. Also, of which I don't take much stock in.
Okay. Was that a computer animation?
It was like an animation,
okay.
Yeah. So.
Do you recall what that animation, what it presented?
Gosh, they showed images of, you know, of a rainy night. They showed images of the 911 operator speaking on the phone, and then, you know, Mr. Zimmerman on the phone, and you know, they showed, you know, streets, but
okay.
You know, I can't recall, or did at that time really did I find any of that relevant. I wasn't very taken by the, you know, by the cases most of my other peers have.
Okay. Do you recall the perspective that animation gave on how the interaction between the two, George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, actually occurred that led to the shooting?
Between Trayvon Martin and Mr. Zimmerman?
In that animation, yes.
I didn't finish watching the animation because I just felt that this was, you know, I mean, what credibility does this have? But I do recall the animation showing that, you know, it showed Mr. Zimmerman's character coming from behind and approaching, and you know, at that point it said, you know, this is what we believe to have happened. At that point, their credibility in my eyes is next to nothing, and I don't have time to waste on that.
And it sounds like the answer to this question is obvious, but certainly if what you heard, if you were sitting on the jury, you would listen to witnesses from the witness stand and see evidence presented. If that was inconsistent with this animation, this cartoon, which would you pay attention to?
I would certainly go with what's on the witness. I mean, okay. Yes.
And I guess the concern that we really try to address is those subtleties that happen from the media, whether it's over time or something as precise as a cartoon, whether or not that would have some effect on you and how you look at the case. So whether or not you have some bias or prejudice that you walk into the courtroom with based upon your media exposure.
I guess no, because what I mean by I guess is that so many of my friends are, you know, very tied up into things like this, past very hyped cases, OJ, what have you, and I see what it does to their lives, and it just consumes them, and that's the last thing I want for myself, for my family. So I just choose not to follow that. I'm a sports nut, to be honest, and if it's not about football, then I really don't have much interest. Sorry.
Well, how about those conversations with those friends who have taken a position on this case? Tell me about that.
Maybe I have 6 that say one way, a half dozen that say the other, and I just, you tell, you know what, I really don't have time to waste on this conversation, so.
Okay. Yeah. Is it, are you sort of the ilk that were you to sit on this jury, make a decision, sounds like it's going to controvert or conflict with at least 6 of your friends' predispositions. Sure. Any concern that you would have with acknowledging your verdict and still moving forward with your friends, general public, anything?
I wouldn't have a problem with that. As I said, I mean, I don't put a lot of stock into these media hyped cases as they do, and well, I mean, if that's something to lose a friend over, something like this, then so be it. You know, I just don't have time for that.
From what you've heard and seen in the media, have you noticed sort of a social or political pressure that's been placed on this case?
So, I mean, certainly. It's a very high-profile case. You know, I mean, it seems that it's got the attention of quite a lot of different people of varying opinions, and that's my opinion on the matter.
Tell me what you think those pressures are.
Well, I'm sure that a lot of folks are probably saying, you know, you should go this way, and then a lot of other folks are saying, well, no, you should go the other way. And I mean, you know, to be frank, I mean, everyone has an opinion, and they all stink. So, what does that matter to me?
I guess the only reason why it might matter to us is if you were to allow those pressures, whatever they are, that are outside the courtroom to affect how you would act inside the courtroom, particularly with how you would reach a verdict.
I think as a father, I can say that, you know, I've always taught my children that, you know, you do what you believe in, and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. You know, at the end of the day, you're the person that, you know, you need to answer to, and, you know, and anyone else, higher power that you believe in, and that's it. No one else matters, and I live by that.
You're going to bring that philosophy to our jury?
If I'm called to do so, yes.
Thanks. No further questions, Ron. I appreciate the time.
You'll just remain seated for one moment. Counsel, when you're ready, approach. In regards to juror I-44, any strikes for cause by the state, by the defense?
No, thank you.
Okay, where that leaves us is with R-40, I believe, am I correct? What I would like to do before I really H6, H7, H18, H29, H35, H81, H69, H86, I5, I19, I24, I33, and I44. Is that acceptable to the state?
It is, Your Honor, subject to the court's rulings, obviously, regarding this. Yes, it is.
Okay, is this acceptable to the defense?
I may have written down I-14 instead of I-19. I just want to confirm that if I might. It's I-19. Sorry, I-19.
I-19?
Yes.
And that's
my
what I
mistake,
said?
not yours.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is that acceptable to the defense?
Yes, we of course had made some argument at the bench, and those are reserved, but short of that, yes.
Okay, acceptable to you with those caveat by Mr. O'Mara?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Okay, can we bring in the ones that we had accepted today? And we'll first bring in the three that you have in the back. I'm going to is it okay to dismiss them?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, bring them and I'll dismiss them. Okay. Please be seated. I bet you think I'm going to tell you you have to come back tomorrow. I'm not. To let you know that you are hereby excused from your jury summons and jury service, but I wanted to thank you on behalf of all the participants in the court for your incredible patience during this process. Without your willingness to sit here and wait for the process to begin, we would not be able to do our job. So I want to thank you very much. You are hereby dismissed. Deputies will help you out. Thank you. And then can I get the others in? Bobby?
present, Your Honor.
Please be seated, and I'm just going to make sure I have everybody here that I expect. So if I call your juror number, please raise your hand. H81, H69, H86, I5, I19, I24, I33, and I44. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin what we call our regular jury selection tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So you will need to be here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. At that time, if you counted, you could see there's 30 seats in the box. We're going to put 30 of you in the box here, and the attorneys are going to begin what we call our regular voir dire or jury selection process. So if you'll be here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the deputies will tell you where they would like you to meet. Of course, I'm going to give you my instructions, and I'm going to ask if you will agree to abide by them. During the overnight recess, you are not to read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about the case. Do I have your assurances that you will abide by those instructions? You're not to discuss the case amongst yourselves nor with anybody else. That includes people at home, friends, family, co-workers, or anybody at all. If they try to talk to you about the case, please tell them that you cannot and ask them to leave. If they insist, please report it to the court deputy. Do I have your assurance that you'll abide by these instructions? You're not to use any type of electronic device to get on the internet to do any independent research about the case, people, places, things, terminology. Do I have your assurances that you will abide by those instructions? Yes. And you're not to read or create any emails, text messages, Twitters, tweets, blogs, or social networking pages about the case. Do I have your assurance that you will abide by those instructions? Yes. And with that, you're excused for the evening. Follow Deputy Jarvis. We'll see you at 9 a.m. Be seated. Mr. West, last night when we were recessing, you had indicated that there were some exhibits that you, a housekeeping matter, wanted to have entered. Do you want to wait until tomorrow, or are you prepared to, did you show some of them to Mr. Manti? I had asked you if you would show them to him and we could go over that today, or you're not prepared to do that right now? Okay, we could do that. That's fine. It was a late night last night. We could do that tomorrow. Is there anything else that we need to take up before we recess for the day?
No, Your Honor. I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing for the next couple of days as well. Maybe, I don't know if that's a conversation we can have at the bench or just something I'm just trying to see where we are. Today's Tuesday. We're doing some general tomorrow. We have Fry tomorrow.
At 4 o'clock at Fry. Mm-hmm.
We might have, I don't know what, I'm just trying to see where we're going.
Okay, the court's intention, like I told these prospective jurors, is to begin the regular voir dire tomorrow. The 30 people will be put in the box and we'll begin our regular voir dire. We'll see where that goes. No matter where we are at that time, we will break about 3:45 so we could get ready for the next witness in the Fry hearing. And then if we need to continue with jury selection on Thursday, we will do that. Was there something else that, does that? Yes, you may approach. Thank you, Susan. Court is in recess until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
Black or part Hispanic. This guy, the last guy, looked partly almost Arab. And then there was that other guy who I thought could have been Puerto Rican, but he said he went to Kuwait. He came from Kuwait.
He was Hispanic.
Yeah, I think he just lived.
worked over.
Yeah, I think he just was.
He said he was from Puerto Rico, born in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, at one point he said something about Puerto Rico too.
He's
Hispanic for sure. His parents were.
Right.
He said he was Hispanic for sure. Even though he said he was from Kuwait, but this last guy, he had like I was telling you, he had a goatee, looked like an Arab sheep. Got the picture. Like this, almost like the ZZ Top guy that was dismissed.
No, I don't see that. Let me check.
And the guy born him that they kept, the Sigmund Freud thing.
See?
He had a Sigmund Freud little goatee right after he